Triple H's reign of terror. It's a time not fondly remembered by longtime fans, in which Triple H, working as a heel, would show unprecedented dominance over the Raw roster for over 2.5 years. It's during this time that Triple H would develop his reputation among fans as a selfish performer, prone to politicking to keep his spot and ready to bury anyone who worked with him. Randy Orton, Goldberg, Scott Steiner, RVD, and others would all fall victim to the so-called golden shovel. This run was unusual in that the WWE has always been a territory that revolved around pushing strong babyfaces. I don't mean necessarily week to week or month to month, but as a general course of business. When you look back at the history of the WWE, the different eras are defined by their babyfaces. These were the wrestlers who were given the big matches and the most TV time. The fans invested in these stars and followed them as they chased and defended one title after another. You can compare this to a promotion like WCW, which generally used the opposite booking strategy. In that company, storylines tended to revolve around the heels, like Ric Flair and the NWO. But from the fall of 2002 until the spring of 2005, Raw was the Triple H show. Triple H's reign of terror began on September 2nd, 2002, when he was awarded the newly christened World Heavyweight Championship by Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff without any match taking place. Prior to this day, the WWE had recognized only one world title, which had been defended on Raw and SmackDown since the brand extension began in April of 2002. However, SmackDown General Manager Stephanie McMahon was able to secure an exclusive deal with Brock Lesnar, who defeated The Rock at SummerSlam 2002 to win the WWE Championship. As this left Raw without a world title, the World Heavyweight Championship was created to fill the void, and as Triple H had been previously named the #1 contender to Brock's title, he was simply awarded the new championship. At the time of this feud with Booker T, Triple H was in his second reign as World Heavyweight Champion, and had just finished an abysmal feud with Scott Steiner, which featured one of the worst matches of all time at Royal Rumble 2003. Booker T started with WCW in 1993 as one part of the tag team Harlem Heat with his real-life brother Stevie Ray. He transitioned into a single star in 1997 and worked his way up to the main event scene by 2000 when he captured his first world title. He'd remain with the company until its closing in 2001, at which time Booker would be one of the few stars to take a 50% buyout on his Time Warner contract, allowing him to join the WWE directly. Subsequently, he'd enter the WWE as the reigning WCW champion, but would be one of the early leaders of the WCW invasion, main eventing SummerSlam 2001 against The Rock. After the conclusion of the invasion angle, Booker would work with Steve Austin in a feud that would feature an unforgettable grocery store brawl. He'd then move on to a short stint with the WWE incarnation of the NWO before forming an unlikely tag team with Goldust. The group's unique chemistry and comedic antics appealed to the fans, and Booker's popularity would begin to rise. But still, Booker's WrestleMania title shot came as a surprise to everyone. Triple H's challenger at WrestleMania 19 would be determined by the result of a battle royal on the February 24, 2003 edition of Raw. Going into this match, The Rock was the heavy favorite, and he would actually take a breather to join JR and the King on commentary at one point, hyping his all but certain title match. One by one, bodies would fly over the top rope until there were only 3 men left, at which time The Rock would go back to work, easily eliminating Christian and Kane. Booker would lay into The Rock with some chops in the corner, but would be laid out with a DDT. The Rock would begin the motions for his people's elbow, but would be distracted by the jeers of the crowd, allowing Booker the time to recover. The Irish whip would be reversed, and Booker would throw The Rock over the top rope, winning the Battle Royal and earning a shot at gold at WrestleMania. I don't think anyone was really expecting Booker to win here. He hadn't even received a televised entrance for this match. Maven got a televised entrance. The next week's Raw would open with a controversial promo segment between Booker T and Triple H. In this infamous promo, Triple H would state that people like Booker T didn't get to be world champion, and that status was reserved for men like Ric Flair and himself.
See, the fact is, Booker, somebody like you doesn't get to be a world champion.
Hunter would call Booker T an entertainer in the WWE only to amuse the crowd with his dancing.
You're not here to be a competitor. You entertain people. Hell, you entertain me all the time. Go ahead, Book. Why don't you entertain? Go ahead. Do a little dance for me, Book.
And would dismiss his former WCW world title reigns entirely, referring to that company as a joke.
When Booker T was WCW champion, wasn't that around the same time frame that other illustrious superstars such as David Arquette and guys like some guy named Vince Russo was champ?
This was atypical for a wrestling promo, as Triple H was actually belittling his opponent's credibility. This kind of negativity is usually frowned upon because it's generally believed that there's nothing to be gained by making your opponent look bad. What will Triple H achieve by beating a bad wrestler? How will Triple H look if he loses to a bad wrestler? Why should fans pay to see Triple H fight a bad wrestler in the first place? This is why wrestlers usually talk up their opponents during promos. Here's a textbook example from the Shawn Michaels-Kurt Angle feud in 2005.
I won a gold medal, and people are talking to me about some guy named Shawn Michaels gliding down from the rafters that year and putting on a wrestling clinic.
Despite all the accolades, you have never had the chance to go to the biggest stage of them all against Mr. WrestleMania.
Here both guys openly acknowledge that their opponent is among the best in the world. They simply disagree over who's better, and the match will settle that dispute. Still, there's no law that says you can't bury your opponent in a promo. Sometimes some storylines might even call for it. In fact, I actually agree with Hunter's point about the WCW World title. There was a time when that title was a prestigious championship, on par with, or even more important than the WWE World title. But by 2000, when Booker T entered the main event scene in WCW, their world title was nearly worthless. As Triple H mentioned, the WCW World Championship was held by the actor David Arquette and the promotion's head writer Vince Russo. It was given away, it changed hands in a tag team match, it changed hands in a straitjacket match. Booker T's first reign began at Bash the Beach 2000 after Jeff Jarrett infamously laid down for Hulk Hogan and forfeit. Vince Russo cut a promo nullifying that match and put Booker in Hogan's place. His third world title reign was won in a San Francisco 49ers match. This was a four-corner item on a pole match. In total, the WCW title changed hands or was vacated 26 times between the start of 2000 and the company's closure in March of 2001. It changed hands 7 times in May of 2000 alone. So when Booker T claims he's a five-time WCW World Champion, you have to put that in context. But there's one line in this promo that's particularly offensive, and its inclusion would take this angle down a very controversial path.
Your job is to make people like me laugh, and you're very good at it. With your nappy hair and your suckers.
Former longtime WWE creative team member Bruce Pritchard claims that the crux of this promo was always meant to be the supposed inferiority of former WCW wrestlers, and that no racist implication was ever intended. Likewise, during the WrestleMania 19 press conference, Triple H would deny cutting a racist promo and state that he was only referring to Booker T's criminal past. Radio personality Don Imus would lose his job about 4 years after this angle took place for making a similar comment about a female college basketball team.
That's some rough girls from Rutgers, man. They got tattoos and some hardcore hoes. That's some nappy-headed hoes there, I'm going to tell you that now.
It made nationwide headlines.
I don't think MSNBC should be carrying the kinds of hateful remarks that Imus uttered the other day.
With your nappy hair and your suckers.
Judging by the groan of the crowd, I think it's safe to say that most people interpreted this as a racist statement. Booker T would offer a retort on the next episode of Raw, cutting a promo discussing his difficult upbringing and his criminal past. Booker was actually convicted in 1987 of 2 aggravated robbery charges after holding up multiple Wendy's fast food restaurants. He and his accomplices actually wore Wendy's employee uniforms during the holdups, as they'd worked for the company for 2.5 years. This of course led police to suspect an inside job, and Booker was quickly arrested. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released on parole after only 19 months. Ric Flair would interrupt, saying that Booker wasn't Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, and that he damn sure wasn't Triple H. Flair would then take a dig at Booker's past and deliver an offer from Triple H for Booker to carry his bags and serve as his chauffeur, as that was all Booker was apparently qualified to do. An enraged Booker T would lay Flair out, then hit the backstage area in search of Hunter. He'd find him wetting his hair in his private bathroom. Triple H would nonchalantly hand Booker $1 and tell him to go fetch a towel. This would of course result in a beatdown, and Hunter would take his frustrations out on recent Tough Enough winner Maven later in the night. The next week, Triple H would cut a promo stating that Booker T was a common street thug who'd blindsided him and was undeserving of a title shot. Goldust would interrupt, stating that he knew deep down
Cockles of your heart
that Triple H was worried, and at WrestleMania, he'd find out that you couldn't judge a book by its cover. A brawl would ensue, and Booker would run in to make the save, causing Hunter and Flair to retreat. Backstage, Triple H would trash the locker room and demand a match with Goldust that night. Booker would accompany Goldust to the ring, but wouldn't get involved until Goldust was thrown to the outside, where Flair would take some cheap shots while Hunter distracted the ref. Booker would take out Flair, but would be attacked with a crutch by a crazed fan in the front row, who would be revealed to be Randy Orton. Strangely, the crowd didn't seem to have much reaction to this revelation, and it's possible they couldn't tell it was Orton being ejected from the arena. Back in the ring, Goldust would attempt to shatter dreams, but would double over in pain, unable to complete the move. Triple H would capitalize with a high knee and then a pedigree for the 3 count. Booker T and Goldust would lay defeated in the ring. The Go Home Raw for WrestleMania would feature a tag team match with Triple H and Ric Flair versus Booker T and Goldust. Booker and Triple H would square off multiple times in this match, and it would get pretty heated. Hunter would even do a blade job following a shot against the steel steps at ringside. Ultimately, Booker would reverse a pedigree attempt into a slingshot to the turnbuckle, and follow it up with a scissor kick to score a clean pinfall victory over the reigning world champion. Booker and Goldust would celebrate their win, while Triple H lay bloody and dazed. Later backstage, Ric Flair would give a pep talk to a defeated-looking Triple H. Ric Flair would tell Hunter that he was the man and to never forget that. Triple H would simply reply,
Obviously, nobody told Booker T that.
then slowly limp away. Triple H vs. Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship would be the 6th match on the card at WrestleMania 19. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler would bicker on commentary, with the King calling Booker a street thug who had Johnny Cochran on speed dial. Jim Ross would put over Booker T for overcoming a difficult childhood and walking away from a life of crime, learning from his mistakes. Booker would threaten Hunter, who would say nothing. The match would open with a lockup, which the referee would be forced to break after both men disregarded the 5 count. Booker would lay into Hunter with some right hooks and some chops, then follow it up with a back body drop. Hunter would briefly take the upper hand with a shoulder tackle before eating a clothesline, which would result in a 2 count. Triple H would then attempt to toss Booker to the outside, but Booker would hold on until he received a shot to the ring post of his own. Outside, Triple H would send Booker into the steel steps at ringside, then follow it up with an elbow on the apron. A beatdown would follow, with Triple H executing a neck breaker for a 2 count. Booker would fire back with some chops, but would catch a spine buster for another 2 count. Triple H would attempt a suplex, which Booker would reverse into a DDT, then follow it up with a spin kick, a side slam, and a flying crossbody for another 2 count. Booker would then set Hunter up for a scissor kick, but Triple H would counter with a sleeper hold, which Booker would escape in the corner. However, Hunter would hit a flying knee, and another pin attempt would follow. Booker T would execute a spine buster of his own, then batter Triple H, who would counter an attack in the corner and would attempt to come off the second rope, only to eat a boot to the face. Hunter would dodge the scissor kick and send Booker back outside. Triple H actually used this as a finisher back in WCW. Triple H would continue to work over Booker's knee, rendering him unable to walk, set Booker up for the pedigree, but Booker would attempt to counter into a slingshot. However, Triple H would kick Booker away, resulting in a ref bump in the corner. But nothing would come of this. The referee would quickly recover and count a 2 count for a roll-up only seconds later. Booker would hit a big reverse elbow and follow it up with a scissor kick, but would be too weak to immediately capitalize with a pin. This delay would allow Triple H to kick out at 2, but to very little crowd reaction. Barely able to walk, Booker would head to the top rope, where Flair would attempt to get involved once again. Hunter would catch Booker with a stiff right hand, then attempt a superplex, which Booker would block and fight his way out of. More interference from Flair. Then Booker would perform a WCW-era finisher of his own, executing the Harlem Hangover from the top rope. Booker would go for the cover, but Flair would place Hunter's boot on the rope, breaking the count and saving the title. Both competitors would slowly rise to their feet, where Hunter would hit the pedigree. Almost 23 seconds would pass before he'd go for the cover. Retaining his title in just under 19 minutes. The match at WrestleMania itself would receive a mixed to positive critical reception. Internet wrestling reviewer Scott Keith would grant the match 2.5 stars, criticizing the lack of crowd reaction and the weak finish. However, this feud has been almost universally panned online, and in some cases outright condemned. The WWE and wrestling in general are no strangers to racist storylines. These have ranged from absurd and sort of ridiculous to extremely offensive.
7 different times I was World Heavyweight Champion, and I had a like you carrying my bag.
I've always thought that wrestling was too one-dimensional and carny to provide serious social commentary. For instance, Triple H was filmed having sex with a corpse just months prior to this storyline. But as Jim Cornette says, personal issues draw money. There have been many critically acclaimed films that deal with racist themes, so I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with WWE featuring a storyline that revolves around racism. It's a very sensitive topic, and one that's sure to elicit a strong reaction. What I think went wrong with this feud, the wrong guy won. When you look at this feud week by week, the build is actually pretty solid. Week 1, Triple H buries Booker T, personally insulting his character, his past, and his accomplishments using racist language. Week 2, Booker T strikes back, laying out Ric Flair and Triple H in separate segments. Week 3, Triple H gets his heat back with a win over Booker's partner, Goldust. Week 4, Booker T beats Triple H clean in the ring, causing Triple H to doubt himself. Considering this feud was hastily put together, that these two didn't have much of a backstory to work with, the WWE did a pretty good job of making Booker T look like a strong contender. Triple H couldn't have put him over any better than on the go-home edition of Raw. So the story leading up to WrestleMania is Booker T, the babyface underdog, who has overcome adversity and walked away from a life of crime, versus Triple H, the blue blood, arrogant, racist snob who dismisses Booker's entire class as beneath him. This storyline only works if the babyface wins. To have the heel go over in this situation indirectly validates all the statements Triple H made in his first promo segment, and that's why this feud is so infamous. The WWE ran a racist angle, then unbelievably let the racist character win. Imagine if Django Unchained had ended with Calvin Candy enjoying white cake in his study, while Django toiled away at the LeQuint Dickey Mining Company. How depressing would that be? Who would want to watch that movie? And this wasn't just another show. This was WrestleMania. What happens at WrestleMania matters. Those are the moments that fans remember forever. And according to Bruce Pritchard, that was the issue here. Vince McMahon was insistent that Brock Lesnar's victory over Kurt Angle in the main event should be the defining moment of the show, and wanted nothing to take place that could steal that spotlight. For this reason, no serious consideration was ever given to having Booker win the world title. This would actually be only the 3rd time in WrestleMania history that a heel had walked out the world champion. The other two being Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17 and Triple H himself at WrestleMania 2000. According to Pritchard, the World Heavyweight title was given the back seat, with Angle vs. Lesnar, Hogan vs. McMahon, and Austin vs. Rock. Really a fan of the modern trend of wrestlers kicking out of finishers left and right. I think it's done far too often, and in most cases, a finisher should just end the match. But almost 23 seconds passed between the time Triple H hit Booker with the pedigree and the time he went for the cover. 23 seconds. It takes less time for Chris Benoit to make a cup of coffee. While I'm sure that Triple H would defend this delay, claiming that he was selling the effects of the Harlem Hangover, I just don't buy that. This extended time between the finisher and the pin accomplished nothing but putting over the pedigree and making Booker look weak. The The fallout of this feud would drag on for another month. The Raw after WrestleMania, Booker would face off against Chris Jericho. The match would be interrupted by Ric Flair. Booker would receive a beatdown at the hands of Jericho, Flair, and Triple H. Shawn Michaels would run in to make the save, but would be quickly overpowered, and the segment would end with Shawn locked in the walls of Jericho and Booker in the Indian Deathlock. The April 7, 2003 episode of Raw would see Booker T and Shawn Michaels take on Triple H and Chris Jericho in a tag match, which would end in a pinfall victory for Booker and Shawn. A brawl would ensue after the match, and a bloody Shawn Michaels would be saved by the returning Kevin Nash, who would go on to appeal to his best buddies to try and get along. On the April 14th episode of Raw, Booker would publicly request a WrestleMania rematch from General Manager Eric Bischoff, who would ultimately determine that Booker would get his rematch only if he and the Hurricane were able to defeat Triple H and Ric Flair in a tag match that night. This didn't make a ton of sense, as Booker had already pinned Triple H clean in a tag match just 1 week before. Why did he need to do it again? The tag match would close the show, with the Hurricane and Booker picking up the victory thanks to assistance from Shawn Michaels. The heels would corner Michaels, but Kevin Nash would make his way to ringside once again, stopping the assault. In the confusion, Nash would strike Booker, who would then retaliate against Michaels. Although this would be played off as a misunderstanding. The next week, Shawn Michaels would be named the special guest referee for the Triple H Booker T rematch. Despite his brief confrontation with Booker the previous week, Shawn would promise to call the match straight down the middle. By the way, has anyone served as special guest referee more than Shawn Michaels? It's practically a part-time job for him. Although Booker would escape the pedigree and connect with the scissor kick twice, this match would ultimately be ruled a no contest due to repeated interference from Chris Jericho and Ric Flair. Kevin Nash would make his weekly trip to the ring to save Shawn Michaels, but will be attacked by Triple H, officially beginning their feud. 2003's Backlash would feature a six-man tag with Triple H, Ric Flair, and Chris Jericho taking on the team of Booker T, Kevin Nash, and Shawn Michaels. The match would conclude with Triple H striking Nash with a sledgehammer to secure a victory for the heels. And these two would face off in singles matches at the next two pay-per-views. Booker would exit the main event scene following this match, but would move into a feud with Christian for the Intercontinental title. He'd remain in the mid-card for the next 3 years, before winning the 2006 King of the Ring tournament. Shortly thereafter, he would defeat Rey Mysterio at the Great American Bash to earn his first WWE World title. Triple H would continue to dominate the Raw brand until 2005, when he'd be defeated by Batista at WrestleMania 21, once and for all ending the so-called Reign of Terror. Despite the controversy, Booker T would actually look back on this feud with fond memories, stating on his podcast that although as a black man, he would have liked to have won the match. The dream match. It's a pretty rare occurrence. You can't just book a dream match. It has to develop organically over years, while two wrestlers are separated by age, contract, or some other outside force. But eventually the stars align, and for better or worse, it happens. In 2005, Hulk Hogan returned to the WWE after a 2-year absence from the ring, and began a feud with Shawn Michaels, who had returned from a long absence himself just a couple years prior. Although two very different performers on the surface, off camera, both men were notorious for their egos and backstage politicking, which would serve as the theme for this feud and ironically lead to its premature ending. Hogan left WCW in 2000 due to issues with Vince Russo over a work shoot angle that saw him win their world title when Jeff Jarrett laid down in the ring. Later in the night, Russo stripped Hogan of the title in a disparaging promo that Hogan felt was a legitimate double cross.
And let me tell you who doesn't give a shit about this company. That politician Hulk Hogan.
He actually went as far as to file a defamation of character suit against the company, which was later dismissed. After a cup of coffee and the short-lived XWF, Hogan returned to the WWE in 2002 for a run that ended a year later when he quit the company due to dissatisfaction with his payoffs and his booking. But he returned in April of 2005 to go into the Hall of Fame and even rescued Eugene from Muhammad Hassan and Daivari the next night at WrestleMania. Muhammad Hassan's run in the WWE is a pretty interesting story in itself and deserves to be covered on its own in a video one day. Wrestler Mark Capani, who is actually 100% Italian, was working a gimmick as an Arab American who complained about Islamophobia and anti-Arab prejudice. This gimmick was extremely controversial, and the WWE was ultimately forced to abruptly abandon the character due to pressure from UPN, the network that aired SmackDown in the US. After a terrorist angle involving Hassan unfortunately aired the same night as the 2006 2005 London bombings, an attack that killed 52 people. Shawn Michaels had retired from in-ring action in 1998 due to a back injury, but resumed a full-time schedule in 2002 after determining that the injury had healed. He became a born-again Christian in his years outside the ring, and also achieved long-term sobriety after years of drug abuse. Despite his 4-year absence from competition, Shawn returned as a main event level star and remained one of the company's most popular wrestlers. On the Raw after WrestleMania 21, Shawn Michaels cut a promo addressing his loss to Kurt Angle the previous night, but he was interrupted by Hassan and Daivari, who called Shawn a loser and chastised the fans for continuing to cheer for him. This of course led to a brawl, and Michaels was locked in the camel clutch by Hassan while Daivari stood kicking him square in the face. The next week, Michaels took on Daivari in a singles match, but lost due to interference by Hassan. Shawn immediately found General Manager Eric Bischoff and demanded a handicap match against the two, but Bischoff denied this request, saying that the best he could do was schedule a tag match at Backlash, should Shawn find a suitable partner. Later in the night, Shawn Michaels returned to cut a patriotic promo. After claiming that he knew only one other man who felt as passionately about America as he did, Shawn dropped to his knees, looked straight in the camera, and asked Hulk Hogan to be his partner at Backlash, which must have made Jim Duggan furious. Despite their lengthy careers, Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan had never really crossed paths before this. During the late 80s and early 90s, Hogan had been the face of the WWE, usually carrying the world title and working with other top-tier stars of the era, while Shawn had been in the tag division, teaming with Marty Jannetty as the Rockers, often working the opening matches of pay-per-views in order to get the crowd going. By the time Shawn began to establish himself as a single star, Hogan was on his way out of the WWE. Shawn had remained under contract to the WWE throughout the Monday Night Wars, and even though he briefly joined the NWO when he returned in 2002, Hogan had already turned face and left the group by then. Shawn Michaels wouldn't have to wait long for an answer. The next week's Raw originated from the famous Madison Square Garden, and Shawn took on Muhammad Hassan in a singles match, but just as he was about to hit his sweet chin music, Daivari interfered, leading to a DQ. As the two heels brutalized Michaels in the ring, Real American hit the speakers, and Hogan came in for the save, hulking up and then cleaning house to a massive pop. Afterwards, he and Shawn Michaels stood side by side, running through his posing routine for the New York fans. And sure enough, Hogan and Michaels defeated Hassan and Daivari that Sunday at Backlash, after a sweet chin music by Michaels allowed Hogan to score the pin. And that was it for a while. Hogan disappeared from television, and Shawn returned to his feud with Kurt Angle. But on the July 4th episode of Raw, Hogan returned to plug his new VH1 reality show on Carlito's Cabana. But the interview got off to a poor start, with Holt taking exception to Carlito's inappropriate remarks about his daughter. Kurt Angle made his way to the ring, which didn't exactly help matters, as he made a pretty awkward double entendre that I guess was supposed to be some sort of sexual innuendo.
But the one person that I would like to make tap out even more than you most of all is your daughter, Brooke.
As the heels double-teamed Hogan, Shawn Michaels ran in to make the save, but Angle and Carlito escaped to the back unscathed. This whole segment was kind of creepy, as Brooke Hogan had just turned 17. A tag match was scheduled to close the show, and Michaels and Hogan picked up the victory after Hogan hit a leg drop on Carlito. But during the long pose-down celebration that followed, Michaels betrayed Hogan, blindsiding him with the sweet chin music. The stunned crowd looked on in shock, and Michaels stood over Hogan's unconscious body. While still surprising, a feud between Shawn and the Hulkster had actually been foreshadowed by the WWE as far back as April.
So two of the biggest egos in the history of the WWE have now joined forces. Everybody in the back has a little pool going on how long it's going to take you two to self-destruct.
The next week's Raw closed with Michaels making an appearance on Piper's Pit to explain himself. Shawn cut a passionate promo, detailing how he'd spent his career doing whatever it took to give the fans what they wanted, sacrificing his health to create moments that would be remembered forever. Shawn claimed that he'd heard the one more match chants at Hogan's Hall of Fame induction, and that once again, he was sacrificing himself for the sake of the fans, as the attack the previous week all but guaranteed a match against Hogan at SummerSlam. But Piper didn't buy any of that, calling Shawn a coward for attacking Hogan while his back was turned, which resulted in him receiving a super kick of his own. This was an unusual promo, as instead of Shawn betraying Hogan because he was jealous of him or they had some kind of personal issue, he was claiming he'd done it for the sake of the fans, which is kind of a babyface move. When Shawn first pitched the idea of working with Hogan, he'd envisioned it as a face versus face program, kind of a gentleman's duel, where he'd be taking on Hogan because deep down inside, he had to know if he could beat him. But in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Meltzer reported that Hogan's deal included creative control, and probably due to worries about receiving a mixed reaction, Hogan decided that he wanted to work a straight face versus heel program, which required Shawn to turn, even though there were no long-term plans for him to remain a heel. He actually turned back face the day after this feud ended. The next week on Raw, Hogan called out Michaels for a face-to-face confrontation. Shawn cut a cerebral promo, admitting that over the years, heel after heel had sworn that they would be the one that ended Hulkamania, but none of them ever did. It never happened. They'd all fallen prey to the aura and the myth of Hulkamania, but Michaels claimed that he never saw it, and that Hogan had never faced someone with his type of unbridled passion.
I want to push you like you have never been pushed before. I want to show you that you are the one that is going to have to step up.
Hogan responded that he was selling out arenas while Michaels was still in high school, and while Shawn definitely wasn't the first to try and end Hulkamania, he wouldn't be the last either.
What is Hulkamania?
Well, Hulkamania is the newest thing, Johnny. It's the thing that is sweeping the country. I'm sure some of these guys over here might know about it.
He closed by officially accepting the match at SummerSlam, although he'd actually already spilled the beans that the match would be taking place during an interview with Larry King a couple weeks earlier. During this interview, Hogan said about Michaels, "I guess he wants that upper tier that he never quite achieved," which would play into the feud later. The July 25th episode of Raw saw Michaels deliver a searing work-shoot promo, where he claimed that he was going off strip and speaking his mind about Hogan, even though WWE wrestlers weren't allowed to do anything that might
hurt the Hulkster.
And everyone was probably going crazy in the back. Michaels claimed that he had no aspirations to star in movies and didn't need his own TV show. He was a wrestler, and that after years of fans supporting Hogan, all he'd given them was the same old tired song and dance. He closed by promising that the Heartbreak Kid would not lay down for Hogan at SummerSlam. I have to admit, at the time, the thought crossed my mind that Shawn might have really been shooting on Hogan. Although he greatly improved his backstage image and reputation during his second WWE run, Shawn Michaels had a history of refusing to do jobs and being very difficult to work with. Of Shawn Michaels' 10 title reigns between 1992 and 1997, 6 ended due to Shawn either vacating or forfeiting the title, and 1 ended with Michaels purposely laying down for Triple H.
Why is Michaels just lying there? It's a mockery. We thought that,
This was his European Championship, which he won after he persuaded Vince McMahon that he should go over the British Bulldog in the main event of the one-night-only English pay-per-view, in order to build interest for an eventual rematch, which shockingly never happened. According to Jim Cornette, Michaels caused so much drama the weekend of WrestleMania 14, refusing to put over Steve Austin and threatening to no-show the match, that no one was totally sure what was going to happen that night in the main event. In order to send a clear message to Michaels that there would be hell to pay should he decide not to go forward with the planned finish, The Undertaker actually taped his fist and sat in front of the monitor at the gorilla position to watch the match. After Austin hit the stunner and the ref counted to 3, he removed the tape and left. But this promo wasn't actually a shoot, as Vince McMahon had approved the whole thing, repeatedly telling Michaels Terry is business in order to egg him on. And indeed, Hogan was all about business. The Hulk Hogan business. There is probably no more infamous backstage politician in wrestling history than Hulk Hogan, who used his star power, or in the case of his WCW run, creative control, to hold back others for his own benefit. An allegation even he himself admits. In 1990, Mr. Perfect, who'd been undefeated for over a year, was booked to win the Royal Rumble, which would have likely established him as a main event level heel. However, the day of the show, Hogan managed to change the finish to secure the win for himself instead, even though he was already the reigning world champion. Hogan changed the finish of the WCW World War III Battle Royal midway through the match, resulting in a tainted win for Macho Man Randy Savage, as Hogan was never legally eliminated from the match. Instead of the event ending with Savage celebrating his first world title victory in WCW, the pay-per-view went off the air with Hogan whining to officials and calling the World Championship "my belt." Savage went on to hold the world title 3 more times, although 2 of his reigns were ended after 24 hours by Hulk Hogan. Probably the most egregious example of Hogan's politicking was the finish to the 1997 Starrcade match against Sting. The NWO, led by Hogan, had wreaked havoc on WCW for over a year. Sting had undergone a dark transformation, becoming a silent vigilante who watched from the rafters and often descended to attack the group. Their match at Starrcade was one of the most anticipated of the era, and should have ended with Sting, the savior of WCW, quickly triumphing over Hogan. But although the feud had been carefully crafted over an entire year, on the day of the show, Hogan wouldn't commit to a finish.
This was just, I don't know really what happened that day. I'm not sure to this day. Yeah, there were nerves that day. A lot of politics going on that day too, so how are we going to end this match? We went into it believing one thing, and then suddenly there was trouble.
big leg drop.
A screw job ending involving referee Nick Patrick making a fast count and debuting wrestler Bret Hart calling for the match to be restarted was eventually settled on. However, Hogan pressured Patrick to count the fall at normal speed, resulting in what appeared to be a clean win. The match was restarted anyway, and Steen won the title a few minutes later, confusing pretty much everyone. Many fans point to this disastrous finish as the beginning of WCW's downfall. Vince McMahon egging on Shawn Michaels apparently worked, as Michaels lampooned the Hulkster on the NetSuite's Raw in an infamous parody of Hogan's recent appearance on the Larry King Show. Although this skit sort of undermined Michaels' heel turn and the serious big match feel this feud was building, it was hilarious nonetheless, and Shawn cut the jokes at the end, looked straight into the camera, and delivered another thinly veiled threat that he would not do the job for Hogan at SummerSlam. This was pretty brutal stuff, but Shawn claims that he ran everything by Hogan first, who told him there were no problems, even if there were rumors that he was complaining to management. The August 8th episode of Raw saw the two men meet in a sort of verbal debate moderated by Jerry Lawler, who opened by asking Michaels his response to Hogan's comment that he never reached the upper tier of the business. Shawn declared that Hogan's lack of respect for his accomplishments meant nothing, as Hogan had coasted through his career on personality alone, and in the ring, they weren't even comparable.
I'm not tickling the ivories with you, old man. I am the most real thing on TV today.
Hogan fired back that Shawn had taken this feud to a whole other level with his cheap shots, and if they were going to start casting stones,
well, I guess all I would have to do was call up Bret Hart.
Of course referencing Shawn's role in the Montreal Screwjob of the 97 Survivor Series. But wait, didn't Hogan refuse to put over Bret Hart and leave the company back in 1993? Maybe that's what he meant. The segment closed with Shawn super kicking Lawler and attacking Hogan, who quickly hulked up and tossed him out of the ring. You have to assume that Hulk played his creative control card here, as Michaels was a clear underdog in this feud, which was being built around the idea that Shawn would go into business for himself at SummerSlam and refuse to put Hulk over. Conventional wisdom says the two never should have touched during this segment, or at the very least it should have been Michaels getting the best in the exchange. Up to this point, Shawn Michaels' heel turn could be described as kind of half-hearted. Sure, he'd stabbed Hogan in the back with a cheap shot and laid out two other legends along the way, but his promos about how he worked just as hard at a house show in Battle Creek, Michigan as he did in the main event of WrestleMania weren't exactly causing riots. Hogan had even suggested that Shawn super kick his son Nick to get heat, which Shawn refused, and Hulk had saved Eugene from attack by Angle before the verbal debate with Shawn, and what seemed to be the WWE reinforcing that he was supposed to be the babyface. But if Michaels still had reservations about turning heel, then they certainly weren't on display on the August 15th episode of Raw, which originated from the one place where Shawn Michaels will always be a heel. In a nearly 15-minute long promo, accompanied by chants of "You screwed Bret," among other more vulgar phrases,
Nice language! Do you teach your children the same talk?
Michaels eviscerated the crowd, mocking their national anthem and taunting that he'd screwed their hero Bret Hart just like he'd screw Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam. As the crowd reached a fever pitch and Shawn guaranteed that Bret Hart didn't have the guts to walk down the aisle and look him in the eye, Bret's music filled the arena and the roof came off the place. But it was all a joke, which the crowd fell for again just a few minutes later when Hulk's music was played. He closed by saying that Hogan was one move away from his star being snuffed out, and that if he didn't believe him, he should ask the Hitman. But just in case this wasn't enough to put Shawn over as a heel, he closed the show by attacking Hogan during his match with Angle, and after briefly teasing a Sweet Chin music, he locked him in the sharpshooter instead as Raw went off the air. In The Observer, Meltzer described Shawn's Montreal promo as one of the greatest of his life, but noted that the emphasis on Bret Hart almost made his match versus Hogan feel secondary. After years of bad blood, Bret Hart had come to a working relationship with the company the previous month, which they hoped would eventually lead to some kind of angle with Michaels. According to Meltzer, there were even internal talks of approaching Hart to referee this match early in the feud, but that obviously never materialized. Still, there were rumors that he might make a run-in or an appearance. Nonetheless, this entire night was a masterful performance by Shawn Michaels, who despite not having had a proper heel run in almost 7 years, proved that he hadn't lost a beat. This was about as strong as a go-home show as possible, but behind the scenes, tensions were running high due to backstage negotiations over the finish for the match at SummerSlam. It was hoped that a compromise could be reached by the night of the show. Hogan made his entrance at SummerSlam as the heavy crowd favorite, although Shawn did have his supporters here and there. Shawn Michaels, now in full-on heel mode, stalled on the outside, refusing to enter the ring until Hogan gave him his space. The match began with both men feeling each other out, neither wanting to make the first move. Finally, they locked up, and the much bigger Hogan sent Michaels flying across the ring and into the corner, which seemed to hurt Shawn's pride more than anything else. He tried locking up again, follow up with a shoulder tackle that sent Shawn flying out of the ring. Back inside, Shawn took control with a knee and some chops. A thumb to the eye briefly slowed Holt's momentum, but he quickly recovered, sent Spanish announce table before being thrown sternum first into the ring post. But he reversed a second attempt, and the match returned to the ring, where Shawn attempted to bust Hogan open, repeatedly pouncing and battering him with right hooks, despite Holt's efforts to break free. Possibly concerned that Hogan, the ref began the test for consciousness, but Hogan came back to life at 3, waving one finger in the air and dropping Shawn with a bat soup and hulking up, nearly taking back the match, before another flying forearm took out all 3 men in the ring. Another kip up and Shawn teased the flying elbow before thinking better of it and locking in the sharpshooter instead. Another ref immediately rushed the ring to resume the officiating, but Hogan refused to tap, edging his way inch by inch towards the bottom rope until Shawn was forced to break the hold. He tried it again, but Holt kicked him away, taking out the second ref in the process. Slowly, Hogan rose to his feet, unable to bear the weight on his right leg, but Shawn caught him with a low blow, then a chair shot straight to the head, with Hulk left convulsing on his edge. 1, 2, and Hogan tossed him aside, hulking up and becoming nearly impervious. The match at SummerSlam was awarded 3.5 stars by Dave Meltzer, who described it as a broomstick match carry job by Michaels, which I think is a little unfair. Although the lion's share of this match was probably put together by Michaels, Hogan's blade job was legitimately scary, and he sold like death for Shawn throughout the entire second half of this match, literally collapsing when Michaels busted him open. Speaking of selling, this match is probably most remembered for Shawn Michaels overselling Hogan's offense. Shawn is given conflicting answers for why he did this. In a 2017 Q&A, so he oversold as that was the way the Shawn Michaels of 1997 wrestled. But in another Q&A in 2014, Shawn admitted that he was angry that the feud wouldn't extend past the scenarios were probably planned at some point. The story reported by The Observer is that Shawn wanted a DQ finish at SummerSlam, which McMahon and Hogan vetoed, and Hogan was steadfast that he'd go over with the leg drop. In an attempt to compromise, Shawn suggested a screw job finish where he would win at SummerSlam, possibly with the help of Kevin Nash, but then give the win back at Unforgiven the next month. Hogan refused, insisting that he go over clean at SummerSlam, although he was willing to do a cage match at Unforgiven with a photo finish, where both guys would escape at nearly the same time, providing that he still won that match as well. Not wanting to lose to Hogan twice, the one that pulled the plug on the feud, as he was unhappy with Shawn's promo the next night on Raw, which completely buried him and the match.
He was cat-like. He had a catcher's catch-can style that even yours truly couldn't figure out.
However, as Michaels also began a feud with Chris Masters that next night on Raw, that story doesn't really add up. I know it's Hulk Hogan, he never wants to lose, but he actually had a pretty good reason this time for refusing to do any jobs. A match against Stone Cold was on the table for WrestleMania 22. Although that ended up not happening, it's understandable that he wouldn't want to take any losses while that was the plan. I have to put you over, so I'm really gonna put you over. It wouldn't be the first time Shawn has acted out due to frustrations during a match. Even close friend Kevin Nash speculated that Michaels may have botched the finish of their WrestleMania 11 match just to take some shine off his big moment. But overselling isn't necessarily bad. Basically all wrestlers do it on occasion, and even the most hardcore kayfabe purists accept that pro wrestling requires some degree of artistic license. Without it, we'd be back to 2-hour-long headlocks, or might as well just be watching MMA. But there is a line between exaggeration and parody, which would have no place in a WWE pay-per-view main event. Fortunately, I don't think Shawn crossed that line here. When you look at it in the context of the entire 21-minute match, if anything, in the moment, it just made the crowd cheer louder. Despite their difficulties working together, this feud was a major success, and the 2005 SummerSlam drew 650,000 buys, the second highest ever for the event. It's surprising that both men were willing to walk away from a rematch that would have surely been another big payday, but I think it's for the best. Even in 2005, there was intrigue and probably couldn't have topped this one anyway. Although some of Michaels' promos veered dangerously close to Vince Russo territory, this feud told a simple, compelling story that ended before it wore out its welcome. There's a story behind every WWE Championship reign, but JBL's world title victory in the summer of 2004 would go down as one of the most surprising and unexpected of all time. In only a few short months, John Layfield went from a perennial mid-card lifer in the tag division to the WWE World Champion. While there's certainly nothing unusual about a mid-card wrestler climbing the ranks to the main event, JBL's push was different, as it seemingly came out of nowhere, a result of injuries and talent turnover leaving the WWE few options, and created a guard and transformed himself into a fat cat, pseudo-statesperson businessman, which played on contemporary politics and emulated the cultural villains of the time. This late career renaissance saw Layfield hold the WWE World title for 280 days, the longest reign in a decade, and established him as one of the most despised heels in modern wrestling history. This is the story of John Bradshaw Layfield's unexpected rise to the main event. John Charles Layfield entered the WWE in 1996 as Justin Hawk Bradshaw. The surname Bradshaw was taken from the name of a guy Bruce Pritchard knew who worked at a power plant in Texas and used to answer the phone, "Bradshaw!" Layfield debuted as a tough guy cowboy and a character similar to his idol Stan Hansen. Although the wrestling cowboy is sort of a timeless gimmick, it didn't get much traction in an era becoming increasingly dominated by cool heels and edgy realistic personalities. By the end of the year, the character fizzled, and an inside joke about Layfield being the son of John Lanza led to him teaming with Barry Windham to form the New Blackjacks. Much like the other new tag teams of the era, the group had little success and eventually disbanded after Windham turned heel. Layfield, now going simply by Bradshaw, resumed his singles career, chalking up wins against other struggling underneath wrestlers without much to show for it. Although still relatively early in his WWE career, Bradshaw had already developed a reputation for being a backstage bully, and a comment about how he could beat anyone in the company in a bar fight led writer Vince Russo, who personally disliked Bradshaw, to pitch the concept of Brawl for All in hopes of shutting him up. Brawl for All was an ill-conceived 16-man legitimate shoot fighting tournament where the winner would receive $75,000 and a concussion for Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. To Bradshaw's credit, he made it all the way to the final round of the tournament, defeating Henry Godwin, Mark Merrow, and Draws all by points, before being summarily knocked out by Bart Gunn in the finals. In his book, Bradshaw stated that he made a mistake by fighting sober, and that the results might have been different if he had some drinks in him. He called the fight the worst night of his life and admitted that he'd rather have died in the ring than lost against Bart Gunn, as the loss had haunted him almost daily ever since. In late 1998, Bradshaw was paired with his real-life best friend Ron Simmons to form the Acolytes, a sinister, occult-inspired tag team known for savagely punishing their opponents, and the two quickly aligned themselves with The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness. It was during this run that Bradshaw had his first real taste of success, as the group's unrepentant brutality got him over, and the team captured the WWE tag titles on 2 occasions in 1999. Following the dissolution of the corporate ministry that summer, the Acolytes began appearing at bars, fighting other patrons who dared question the legitimacy of professional wrestling. This establishment was actually owned by referee Tim White and was the setting of the first of the infamous 2006 lunchtime suicide skits. On the January 31st, 2000 episode of Raw, the Mean Street Posse received a savage beating at the hands of the newly debuted Radicals. Their offer to hire Farouk and Bradshaw as bodyguards led Bradshaw to smell opportunity, and the Acolyte Protection Agency was incorporated by the end of the night. So from then on, the group became babyface bodyguards for hire, and although the two were still presented as dangerous brawlers in the ring, the group was mostly used for comic relief and backstage segments where they'd play cards and smoke cigars, while insisting that anyone who approached enter through an uninstalled door. According to Bradshaw, the gimmick was conceived by Vince McMahon himself after Layfield hopped into his limo for a ride to the hotel while blackout drunk. Although they were overshadowed by the more popular teams of the time, the APA managed to capture their 3rd World Tag Team Championship in July of 2001, and Bradshaw won his first singles title from the Hurricane in October of that year, holding the European Championship for 8 days before losing it to Christian in a match cut from television for time. The 2002 brand extension saw Bradshaw and Farouk drafted to different shows, ending the partnership. Bradshaw was initially given a push, teaming with Stone Cold Steve Austin in his feud against the NWO, but after a loss to Scott Hall at that year's Backlash and Stone Cold's exit from the company, Layfield was relegated to competing for the Hardcore Championship, a title he won 18 times in 77 days. After taking time off due to an injury, he reunited with Farouk and OVW to reform the APA, and they returned to active competition in the WWE on the June 19, 2003 episode of SmackDown. During Bradshaw's absence, his interest in investing had led him to publish Have More Money Now. Although marketed as a layman's guide to financial management, the book also served as a memoir, discussing his early life and his career in the wrestling business. The book brought Bradshaw some mainstream notoriety in the way of regular appearances on Fox News, and at Vince McMahon's suggestion, he returned to the WWE with a new clean-cut look, intended to freshen up his character. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon failed to bring up the idea before the printing of the first edition. Following WrestleMania 20, WWE management made the decision to release Farouk, and the March 18, 2004 episode of SmackDown saw general manager Paul Heyman, who was perturbed by the APA not defending him against Stone Cold Steve Austin the previous week, give the group a title shot against Too Cool later in the night, with the apparent stipulation that the team would be fired should they fail to capture the gold. The match ended with Bradshaw taking the pin following a super kick, and backstage the two stormed Heyman's office with Bradshaw shouting,
"Who the hell you think you are? You're gonna fire us? I want to hear it out of your mouth right now!"
But Heyman replied that he never said he would fire the APA if they lost the match. He said he would fire Farouk. He went on to explain that he and WWE management thought very highly of Bradshaw. He advised Bradshaw to consider his own future. You have to wonder, why did Bradshaw take the pin in the tag match if it was Farouk who was going to get fired? If Farouk was holding Bradshaw back, wouldn't it have made more sense for him to take the fall? Despite Heyman's on-screen remarks, behind the scenes, the idea of a main event push for Bradshaw was met with widespread skepticism. This was a guy who, despite multiple chances, had never found success outside of the acolytes. And at 37 years old, with multiple surgeries behind him and his partner released from the company, he seemed to be destined for retirement. But a lack of heels on the SmackDown roster left the WWE with no choice but to create new stars. World champion Brock Lesnar had dropped the title to Eddie Guerrero a few months earlier at No Way Out before leaving the company after WrestleMania. With top stars Kurt Angle and The Big Show injured, and Booker T wrapped up in a feud with The Undertaker, Eddie was left with absolutely no one to work with. Vince McMahon was impressed with Bradshaw's success in the financial world, and at the urging of Bruce Pritchard, was willing to take a huge gamble on Bradshaw, with the understanding that if he failed to get over this time, he was likely looking at a release. As the Bradshaw character had grown stale and lacked credibility, Layfield was given a complete gimmick overhaul that tied into his newfound status as a financial news talking head. During his Fox News appearances, Layfield was generally credited under his real name, but the WWE wanted to retain some reference to his previous character, so Bradshaw became his middle name, and his rename was abbreviated to JBL, in reference to President Lyndon B. Johnson, or LBJ, as even though the JBL character wouldn't be running for any office per se, he'd still be a politician. While discussing the creation of the character on his podcast, Bruce Pritchard claimed that many of the JBL character's mannerisms were meant to draw comparisons to then President George Bush, who was an unpopular figure among SmackDown's large Latino demographic. In later interviews, JBL has described the character as a combination of conservative figure Pat Buchanan, Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke, and oil baron J.R. Ewing from the TV show Dallas, who most of you watching this probably knows the inspiration behind the Who Shot Mr. Burns Simpsons storyline. On the March 25th, 2004 episode of SmackDown, the new JBL character made his first appearance to a somewhat tepid reception. In a short promo, JBL declared that even though SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman had quit the company earlier in the week due to being drafted to Raw, and that he could easily bring his partner Ron Simmons back to the WWE if he wanted, he wasn't going to do that. JBL explained that his beer drinking and card playing had gotten him nowhere, and now he was getting serious about his wrestling career. He called himself an impact player and promised that business was about to pick up. Keeping his word to make an impact, JBL attacked Eddie Guerrero in the main event that night, laying him out with a clothesline from hell. The critics were less than impressed with Layfield's new character. In the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer remarked that JBL reminded him of a small Southern Territory regional heel, and commented this was hardly a strong debut. Writing for the Pro Wrestling Torch, Wade Keller stated that Guerrero had been brought down by feuding with a mid-card heel like Bradshaw, and reported that the feeling in the locker room was that Layfield's push was confirmation that SmackDown was the red-headed stepchild in Vince McMahon's eyes. The April 1st episode of SmackDown saw JBL arrive to the building in a limousine, which was driven by a Hispanic chauffeur who he berated for not speaking English. That night, new general manager Kurt Angle introduced the Great American Award, to be bestowed upon a superstar who exemplified the same heroism and virtues as himself. The nominees would be determined from the winners of that night's matches, and the award winner would be named the #1 contender to Eddie Guerrero's world title. Later in the night, Angle revealed that the results would be announced on the next week's episode, and that the fans were invited to vote for their favorite at WWE.com. As Angle began to denounce the lying, cheating, and stealing lifestyle of Eddie Guerrero, Guerrero made his way to the ring in a signature lowrider for a confrontation, which resulted in Angle introducing JBL as the 5th nominee for the award. Bradshaw called his nomination an honor and declared himself a shoo-in after an inspiring speech about his upbringing and how he left his hometown to move to the greatest place on earth, New York City. JBL went on to boast about his recent investments, referring to himself as one of America's great success stories. He claimed his attack on Guerrero the previous week was just business, and announced that he was coming after Eddie's gold. Guerrero responded by stealing and desecrating JBL's beloved hat. Not wanting to risk ruining his $3,000 suit, Bradshaw could do nothing but look on in horror. The next week saw JBL cut an odd promo, where he claimed that although the hat Eddie ruined cost over $1,000, that type of money was nothing to him, and he didn't have to worry about paying for designer clothes, luxury hotels, or the occasional prostitute here and there.
Hey, I'm a male.
To prove his point, he picked a fan at random and promised to award him $1,000 if he could wax his limousine in 60 seconds. Of course, he emptied the bottle onto the hood with only 15 seconds left on the clock, making the task impossible. This segment was a shameless rehash of the $1 Million Man shtick, but it still managed to draw heat. Later in the night, Angel called the nominees for the Kurt Angle Great American Award to the ring. Bradshaw actually came in third in the fan voting, beating out Haas and the Big Show by a decent margin. Strangely, the URL at the top of this image read WWF.com. So either the WWE was among the roughly 1% of internet users still using Netscape Navigator in 2004, or somebody was lazy and reused an old graphic. Just as Kurt Angle was about to award the trophy to fan favorite John Cena, JBL grabbed the mic, promising that he had footage that would prove he deserved the honor more than any other man in the ring. What followed was video of JBL outside in the woods patrolling the Texas border for illegal crossings and single-handedly running off a whole herd of Mexicans, as he put it. This suspiciously tall and muscular immigrant is Rudy Boy Gonzalez, who was Daniel Bryan's trainer. The segment was actually filmed on land owned by a friend of Layfield's father, and according to Bruce Pritchard, they accidentally set up in the wrong location and were confronted by an angry homeowner wielding a shotgun.
If I had not already taken care of my business earlier in the day, I would have shit myself right there.
Kurt Angle couldn't have been more impressed with JBL and immediately named him the winner. But when he went to present the award, it had been replaced by a crudely built trophy with Eddie Guerrero's portrait from the 2004 No Way Out poster at the base. And enraged JBL grabbed the mic and demanded that Guerrero show his face and return his award. Eddie rode out with the trophy strapped to his hood and made his way to the ring to confront the two heels. According to Eddie, it was all a misunderstanding, as he'd simply found the award out in the parking lot and was returning it to its rightful owner. Unfortunately, the prize was of poor quality and came apart at the slightest touch.
That's all right, Holmes. Eagles can fly with one wing.
This led to a brawl and the total destruction of the trophy with a steel chair. Although JBL's border chasing was met with a hostile reception from the San Antonio SmackDown crowd, his anti-illegal immigration rhetoric was reportedly loudly cheered at a house show in Iowa the next week, causing Bradshaw to wisely change gears and directly insult the fans instead. The next week opened with Guerrero cutting a promo on the phoniness of the new JBL, but he was interrupted by a paid message from the Friends of John Bradshaw Layfield, which portrayed Eddie as a criminal, unworthy of the prestigious WWE Championship, and urged fans to support JBL in his pursuit of the title. Eddie's outrage would prompt Kurt Angle to grant him a match against JBL that very night, but unfortunately, Layfield hadn't slept well the last 2 days and was simply too tired to have a match, suddenly deciding that Eddie Guerrero versus John Bradshaw Layfield was simply too big a match to give away on television for free. Angle made the match official for Judgment Day instead. Unfortunately, not everyone shared Kurt's enthusiasm, as the Pittsburgh Tribune ran an article that Sunday calling the JBL gimmick antique and lamenting that not even Eddie Guerrero's overwhelming popularity would be enough to save the next SmackDown pay-per-view from going broke. The April 22nd, 2004 episode of SmackDown saw JBL easily defeat Mexican heavyweight champion El Gran Luchador, aka Paul London, in a mask. This was his first televised match since a split with Simmons, and after changing back into a suit, he laid out Guerrero at the end of the night with a powerbomb and the clothesline from hell. Although at this point the WWE had done a pretty good job of establishing JBL as an insincere narcissist, they'd given the fans little reason to pay to see him wrestle Eddie Guerrero for the World Championship. Sure, he jumped him a couple of times from behind, but these incidents were nothing more than cheap shots from a career tag team wrestler who bought new clothes and rented a limo. But at a house show in Eddie's hometown of El Paso that weekend, the company turned up the heat considerably. As Mother's Day was right around the corner, Guerrero celebrated by presenting his wife and mother with flowers in the ring. This prompted JBL to make an entrance, then immediately beat Eddie into unconsciousness. Incensed, Miss Guerrero loudly protested this monster's treatment of her son, as Vicky and Eddie's children looked on in terror. Betraying his media image for his true self, himself, JBL lumbered over this poor defenseless woman, shouting, before aggressively grabbing her shoulder, which caused her to collapse in the ring, the victim of a fear-induced heart attack. This incident was played in full the next Thursday on SmackDown with no commentary. In a one-question interview that night about the event, Guerrero became too enraged and emotional to utter a single word. But during an interview conducted via satellite from his hometown of New York City, JBL offered no apologies, denying any blame for the heart attack suffered by the matriarch of the Guerrero family and claiming that he
asked the old lady, Mrs. Guerrero,
to leave the ring so that he could finish his business with her son. Bradshaw passionately asserted that it was a bring your family to work day and that they had no place in the ring, which was his place of business.
Now these people may like having 18 to 20 of them living in the same house, but that doesn't mean you bring every little snot-nosed kid and 100-year-old grandmother into the ring.
And during a heated segment the next week after Bradshaw's victory over Rey Mysterio, which saw Eddie Guerrero arrested for vandalizing Bradshaw's limo, JBL upped the ante by beating the handcuffed champion and declaring,
"She dies! She dies!"
But according to creative team member Bruce Pritchard, the Eddie's mom segment wasn't just part of the show. According to Pritchard, Miss Guerrero was booked to suffer a heart attack at the hands of JBL that night. But she'd already been feeling ill that day and was so overcome with emotion and adrenaline that when JBL approached her in the ring, she legitimately fell to the mat and had what he described as a real-life minor heart attack. Luckily, in the interest of realism, the WWE had retained her actual doctor for the show, so he was able to recognize that she was having a genuine medical episode right away. While fans still might have not necessarily believed JBL could beat Guerrero for the title, this angle with Eddie's mom was a home run and certainly gave potential pay-per-view buyers a reason to want to see them wrestle. However, what no one knew at the time is that the main event of Judgment Day would go down as one of the most gruesome bloodbaths in WWE history. JBL used his entrance at Judgment Day 2004 to insult Eddie's mother and the crowd.
I know that a lot of you swam an awful long way and climbed a bunch of fences to get here. I did just lose my housekeeper. See, she stole from me, a Mexican lady. And I, out of the generosity of my heart, will use Eddie Guerrero's mother as my maid.
Eddie made his way to the ring to a loud ovation and sneered at Bradshaw from the top rope before diving right into the action. The match went to the outside immediately, with Eddie repeatedly slamming Bradshaw into the ring post, then appropriately onto the Spanish announce table. Already deciding that he'd had enough, JBL attempted to walk out on the match, but Guerrero was close behind, dragging him back to the ring before referee Brian Hebner could finish his 10 count. Overcome with rage and ranting in Spanish, Eddie toyed with his fallen opponent, grinding his boot into his face. But back outside, JBL found an opening, reversing an Irish whip and sending Eddie into the steel steps. He followed it up with some stiff punches before driving Guerrero's head into the announcer's table. Back inside, Eddie attempted to come back with another failed Irish whip, and a big boot sent him collapsing to the mat, where JBL hit an elbow drop for the first pin attempt of the match. Irish whip into the corner, and Bradshaw executed a side headlock takedown, attempting to slow his much more agile opponent's pace. Feeding off the energy of the crowd, Eddie broke the hold and managed to fend off Bradshaw with a series of arm drags. Guerrero attempted a crossbody over the top rope, but was caught in midair by his much larger opponent, who sent him flying to the mats with a fall-away slam. Back to his feet, Eddie tried to regain his momentum with some chops, but an unsuccessful charge was countered with a bat suplex by JBL. Back inside for some brawling, and Bradshaw locked in a bear hug, but Eddie fought his way out, repeatedly whipping JBL into the corners, before knocking him off his feet with a drop kick and nailing 2 of his 3 amigos suplexes. But Bradshaw escaped the third, coming off the ropes with his clothesline from hell, which Guerrero narrowly avoided. Brawling his way out of a powerbomb, Eddie fired up, but he collided with the ref during a sprint to the ropes. With the official out cold, JBL grabbed a steel chair and delivered a brain-splattering headshot, and it's here that this match went completely off the rails, as Eddie Guerrero's botched blade job resulted in blood pouring from his forehead like a water faucet. Suffering from a severe blow to the head and legitimately dangerous levels of blood loss, Eddie stumbled around the outside, withstanding additional abuse at the hands of JBL. And back inside the ring, JBL connected with his clothesline from hell, but there was no one to make the count. Just off camera, a company official handed out towels to fans in the front row to wipe away Eddie's blood from the guardrail. Finally, referee Charles Robinson ran in to make the count, and to secretly give word that management was ordering that they end the match early and skip to the finish. 1, 2, and Eddie kicked out, leaving a large pool of blood where he'd rested his head. With a broad smile on his face, Bradshaw stalked his opponent, but his attack missed, laying out the second ref instead. Without missing a beat, JBL executed a devastating powerbomb powerbomb just as the first ref came back to life, but Eddie somehow raised his shoulders to the crowd's disbelief. With blood still gushing from what used to be his forehead, Eddie made his way to his feet and found his second win, beating JBL to the ground with some right hands and reversing a fall-away slam for a DDT. With his last ounce of strength, Eddie slowly climbed to the top rope for the frog splash, but he took too long and JBL recovered, dodging the attack. As Guerrero lay dazed in the ring, Bradshaw grabbed the world title and a steel chair at ringside. While hiding the belt behind his back, he threw the chair into the ring to distract the ref, but his plan backfired as Eddie kicked JBL square in the balls, then bashed him across the head with the title in full view of the official, leading to his disqualification at 23 minutes 15 seconds. But Eddie disregarded the pleas of the referee and the sounds of the ringing bell, and Bradshaw would take two dangerous chair shots to the head and a fraud splash before the pay-per-view went off the air. The match at Judgment Day was voted Match of the Night by the readers of the Wrestling Observer newsletter and awarded 3 3/4 stars by Dave Meltzer, who called it an awesome spectacle, reminiscent of old-school territory main events where blood was used effectively and not so frequently that it lost its purpose. Wade Keller awarded the match 2 3/4 stars, calling it perhaps the greatest of Bradshaw's career, but reported that most within the WWE felt that Eddie's blade job took away from the drama, as rather than fans getting into Guerrero's comebacks, they were either disgusted by the horrific state of his face or simply concerned for his well-being. The blade job at Judgment Day was planned beforehand, but Eddie actually wasn't booked to bleed that severely. Since the company ushered in the PG era in 2008, blading has been forbidden in the WWE. Batista actually claims to have been fined $100,000 by Vince McMahon for blading during a steel cage match against Chris Jericho on Raw that year. Although back in the Ruthless Aggression era, wrestlers getting color was relatively common, rarely did it ever go this far. Wrestlers draw blood by cutting their foreheads with hidden razor blades. The forehead has a lot of blood vessels, so it'll bleed profusely, and the area also heals quickly. But there's always the risk of cutting too deeply and slashing an artery, which is what Eddie unintentionally did here. Initial dirt sheet reports stated that Guerrero went into shock or passed out backstage due to blood loss, but these were exaggerations. He was taken to a nearby hospital for stitches and declined a blood transfusion, receiving 2 bags of fluids instead. However, the Torch reported that the stitches Eddie was sporting during his promo on the May 20th episode of SmackDown were actually applied by the makeup department, as the real ones weren't visible on camera. But the WWE played into the rumors that night by having Eddie collapse in the ring during the 6-man tag main event, in an angle similar to the time Shawn Michaels passed out during a match against Owen Hart in 1995, after a story about his involvement in a parking lot brawl outside a bar with a group of Marines made headlines. With a sold-out crowd paying $813,000, Judgment Day was the second largest live gate in the history of California wrestling, but the show fared less well on pay-per-view, where it earned only 235,000 buys for a buy rate of 0.38, the third lowest in the company's history at that point. But in fairness, pay-per-view buys were down almost completely across the board in 2004, and Judgment Day ended up earning more buys than No Mercy, Taboo Tuesday, and Armageddon that year. In The Observer, Meltzer praised the WWE for the booking of Layfield's push and his performance in the role, stating that it was unlikely that anyone in his position could have done better, but he felt the jury was still out on Bradshaw's prospects as a main event player, and remarked that the numbers for Judgment Day didn't bode well for the rematch at the Great American Bash, as the company would be hard-pressed to come up with a stronger late storyline addition to sell the show than the heart attack angle with Eddie's mom. Seemingly unfazed by the criticism, JBL attacked his detractors in his weekly WWE.com column, calling those who doubted him out-of-shape internet wannabe homosexuals. On the June 3rd, 2004 episode of SmackDown, JBL cut a promo alleging that Eddie Guerrero had intentionally gotten himself disqualified at Judgment Day in order to hold on to his title. He announced that GM Kurt Angle had allowed him to name the stipulation for the rematch, and as such, he was choosing a match that wouldn't allow Eddie Guerrero to get himself disqualified. The match at the Great American Bash would be a Texas bull rope match, where the two men would fight to be the first to touch the 4 corners of the ring in succession. But by the beginning of the next week, John Layfield was convinced he'd soon be released. During a match at a house show in Munich, Germany that Saturday, Bradshaw repeatedly goose-stepped across the ring, displaying the Nazi salute. These types of displays are illegal in Germany. For instance, in 2007, a Berlin man was jailed for 5 months for training his dog to hail Hitler on command. But the law makes exceptions for the use of the salute as part of an artistic performance, so it's unlikely Layfield could have been successfully prosecuted. Still, the incident in the accompanying video made nationwide headlines, and Layfield was immediately fired by CNBC, who'd hired him to make twice weekly appearances on their news analyst show Bullseye only a month earlier. Layfield described his release from the network as being hung out to dry, and claimed that he specifically put language in his contract to clarify that the network understood the nature of the controversial persona he played on WWE television. In an interview with the Washington Post a few days later, Layfield stated that he was simply playing the bad guy and trying to incite the crowd. He compared his role in the WWE to that as an actor in a film, and remarked that he shouldn't be held personally liable for the actions of his on-screen character. He went on to elaborate that he lived and wrestled in Germany before joining the WWE, and had used the Nazi salute many times in the past to get heat.
Listen, if I felt that those were your views, reflected in what your character is supposed to be, and I'd say to you, look, you're a creepy guy, and you know what I mean.
And you should say that, because the character I play is reprehensible, has nothing to do with me.
And I support you in your bid to clear your name.
In the Torch, Wade Keller reported that WWE management were in an uproar about the incident, but were aware that Layfield acted out of ignorance and not an attempt to create controversy. However, an unnamed WWE employee was quoted as saying that Layfield's bullying backstage had earned him a lot of enemies over the years, and those enemies were waiting for something like this to sink him. On the Tuesday after the incident, the WWE posted a statement on their website apologizing for Layfield's actions, but they removed it only a few hours later when news of the CNBC firing broke, reportedly because the loss of this six-figure gig led to some internal sympathy for Layfield. Vince McMahon came to feel that the controversy was being blown out of proportion, and that the loss of the position with CNBC was punishment enough. But JBL's Jew-stepping wasn't the only controversy of the tour in Germany. The next night in Oberhausen, Guerrero was reported to have received a negative reaction by a small group of fans, which led him to grab the mic and yell, "Eddie doesn't suck, Germany sucks," then proceed to work a heel versus heel match against Bradshaw. His actions displeased WWE agents, who felt that he overreacted and behaved unprofessionally. The incident was attributed to exhaustion from the travel schedule and the pressure to keep going as champion despite being pretty banged up physically. The June 10th episode of SmackDown, which was taped while the fallout of Layfield's German controversy was still playing out, saw JBL refuse to enter the arena in Long Island as he considered the city a toxic waste dump. As JBL shouted insults to his driver from the backseat of his limo, the partition came down and Eddie Guerrero was staring back at him dressed as a chauffeur. He took the vehicle for a quick drive through the city before arriving at the stage entrance later in the night. As JBL was napping in the back seat, Eddie took to the ring and cut a promo greeting the Long Island fans. Bradshaw slowly crawled from the back seat and heartbreakingly surveyed the damage to his beloved limousine as Eddie laid across the ring ropes with a huge grin on his face. Layfield's firing from CNBC was celebrated in a promo by Guerrero on the June 17th episode of SmackDown, and JBL addressed the controversy later in the night, refusing to apologize for his actions in Germany and attacking the liberal media for vilifying him, as well as the fans for wanting to see him fail out of jealousy. Bradshaw trashed CNBC for letting him go and berated the crowd, saying that they were poor and unsuccessful because they didn't have his backbone. He claimed that the fans hated him only because he reminded them of what they'd never be, and he swore to win the world title at the Great American Bash just to shove it down their throats. Bradshaw's SmackDown promo was absolutely vicious, and by far the best of his career up to that point. I'd be surprised if he didn't believe every word of it. At one point it looked like he might actually jump the rail at a fan he accused of booing American soldiers. In The Observer, Meltzer wrote that having the JBL character apologize on television wouldn't have made sense, and compared the situation to an angle in 1989 where Terry Funk suffocated Ric Flair with a plastic bag and was forced to give an apology on air due to complaints to Turner Broadcasting from angry parents. But he believed that Layfield should have issued an apology explaining his side of the story on WWE's website. Meltzer felt that Bradshaw's promo on SmackDown wouldn't be seen as a heel talking in character and would further disparage wrestling's reputation with the mainstream, while JBL actually winning the title at the Great American Bash seemed like a long shot. The Torch reported that Vince McMahon was said to be very supportive of Layfield and had taken the attitude that there's no such thing as bad press. Given the WWE's reputation for leaning in the controversy, some fans speculated that Bradshaw might have just goose-stepped his way into a world title run. The match at the Great American Bash went on second to last, losing the main event spot to The Undertaker versus the Dudley Boys. Despite JBL specifically choosing a Texas bull rope match because it allowed no disqualification, on commentary, Michael Cole explained that the intentional removal of the rope actually would result in a DQ. The match began with Eddie taking the offense right away, using the rope to drive Bradshaw to the mat and attempting to choke him into unconsciousness, but JBL fought back using the cowbell and cornered Eddie against the turnbuckle for some strides. With Guerrero off his feet, Bradshaw Bradshaw began touching the corners, reaching the second before Eddie shut him down with a drop kick and a back suplex, which allowed him to begin tagging the corners himself. But JBL hooked the ropes to stop his momentum and caught Eddie with a stiff shot to the throat. Now in control of the matchup, Bradshaw went to work beating Guerrero with the bull rope and cowbell before tying him up in the ropes for a choke on the outside. Throwing Guerrero into the announce table, JBL attempted a powerbomb, but Eddie escaped, using the ropes to take out Bradshaw's legs, which caused him to bash his head on the corner of the TV monitor. JBL managed to reverse an Irish whip and sent Guerrero flying across the announcer's table, which turned out to be a huge mistake. Back in the ring and bleeding from the forehead, JBL begged for mercy, but all he got was another stiff chair shot to the head. Wrapping the rope around JBL's neck and dragging him like an animal, Eddie began to touch the corners, but Bradshaw grabbed the ropes for dear life, refusing to let go even with Guerrero choking him to death. With Eddie's momentum lost, the referee waved off the lights, and the two resorted to trading blows back and forth before JBL hit a DDT that allowed him to reach the first two corners. However, Eddie slid through the gap in his legs, using the rope for a low blow that sent Bradshaw into a full flip. Frustrated and ready to end the match, Eddie connected with the Three Amigos followed by a frog splash, then confidently began to tag the corners for the victory. But JBL was unwilling to give up and rolled out of the ring to stop Guerrero from reaching the last one. Eddie attempted to use the leverage of the rope to force Bradshaw to his feet, but a shot with the cowbell caught him off guard. Seconds later, he was thrown from the ring apron into the seemingly indestructible Spanish announce table. Probably pretty pissed the table didn't break, Bradshaw connected with a powerbomb that sent it flying to pieces. Back inside, JBL easily touched the first three turnbuckles, but Eddie grabbed the bottom rope, preventing him from reaching the fourth. Irate, he bashed Guerrero with the cowbell and restarted the sequence, but Eddie refused to quit, using all his strength to keep Bradshaw from reaching the fourth corner, then racking him with the cowbell. Now back on the offense, Guerrero pummeled JBL with the rope before wrapping it around his neck and beginning to touch the corners. But unbeknownst to him, Bradshaw was close behind, also tagging the turnbuckles. At the third corner, a clothesline from JBL resulted in both men getting credit for the contact. As Bradshaw inched his way towards the fourth corner, Eddie began to pull with all his might, then made a desperate charge, winning the match to retain the world title in 21 minutes, 6 seconds. Or so it seemed. As Guerrero celebrated in the ring, General Manager Kurt Angle came out and called for a replay of the finish. In slow motion, the video clearly showed that Bradshaw's bat struck the turnbuckle first. Therefore, in a reversal of the ref's initial decision, John Layfield was awarded the WWE Championship. The stunned crowd rose in a standing ovation for Guerrero as he left the ring. Dave Meltzer awarded the match the Great American Bash 3 1/4 stars, praising Bradshaw and Guerrero for a commendable job and a difficult match to work. He reported that the title change was a relatively late decision by Vince McMahon, and that he'd been strong on the JBL character from the beginning and felt that it was time for a heel champion who could be chased. The Torch reported that according to friends, Eddie was unhappy about the title change, but was keeping it close to the vest. However, Bruce Pritchard disputes this, claiming on his podcast that the idea to drop the title to JBL actually came from Guerrero himself. Pritchard further revealed that there was a great deal of back and forth about the actual finish to the match, and at McMahon's suggestion, he eventually called Dusty Rhodes for advice, even though Dusty was working for TNA at the time. I think the finish here protected Guerrero and put heat on JBL for stealing the title, which is kind of the best possible outcome. The July 15th episode of SmackDown wrapped up the feud, with Bradshaw successfully defending his title against Eddie Guerrero in a steel cage match, thanks to assistance from a masked Kurt Angle. From there, he went on to hold the World Championship for 259 more days, narrowly eking out cheap victories and matches against The Undertaker, Booker T, and The Big Show, before dropping the title to up-and-comer John Cena at WrestleMania 21. In later interviews, Layfield has been quick to attribute the success of the character to the talents of Eddie Guerrero, telling ESPN.com, "If it had been anybody but Eddie Guerrero, you would have never heard of JBL. Eddie's hip, Latino hustler character was the perfect foil for the racist, fat cat, American value-preaching JBL, and Guerrero was able to carry him through two of the greatest matches of his career, establishing Bradshaw as someone capable of working the main event." Despite the on-screen rivalry, the two were close friends backstage, with Guerrero even serving as a groomsman at Layfield's wedding. At the Eddie Guerrero tribute show, Layfield refused to go over Eddie's nephew Chavo, instead insisting that he lose clean to the Three Amigos and a fraud splash out of respect.
My first main event pay-per-view. That main event might have never happened if it hadn't been for Eddie Guerrero. You see, a lot of people within the WWE, a lot of fans, believe that I wasn't capable of being a main event wrestler. Eddie Guerrero went to bat for me.
I think JBL's story is a reminder that someone's lack of past success doesn't necessarily indicate their potential in the future. Despite years of aborted pushes due to a perceived lack of personality, when the right circumstances finally came, Layfield stepped up in a high-pressure sink-or-swim situation and was able to reinvent himself as one of the most hateable people on television. Although the initial critical reception was pretty bad, the character was voted best gimmick by fans in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that December, and the feud with Guerrero itself ended up getting an honorable mention for Feud of the Year. Although John Layfield the person remains a very polarizing figure among wrestling fans, JBL the character is now generally recognized as one of the greatest heels of the 2000s. It's strange to think that in some other universe where John Layfield didn't write a book, Brock Lesnar didn't quit the company, Kurt Angle and the Big Show didn't get injured, and Eddie Guerrero didn't take a personal interest in making this feud a success, Bradshaw is just another guy from the Attitude Era you never hear about. The life of a professional wrestler is sort of ridiculous when you stop and think about it. Grown men and women who travel the world in spandex, risking life and limb to win fictional titles.
I gotta do a loser co-signs a small business loan for Coco Beware match.
I have a loser has to act out 50 Shades of Grey with Kamala in a YMCA locker room match.
But it's a career path that demands great sacrifice and total devotion. Here's Bret Hart wrestling at the 1990 Survivor Series. His brother Dean died of kidney disease the day before this pay-per-view. Nobody offered him the night off, and Pat Patterson actually told him, "You look like somebody died," while in the elevator before the show. Here's Jim Ross commentating at the 1998 Capital Carnage pay-per-view in London. His mother unexpectedly passed away the day before this event. He learned the news when his plane landed and still called the show. The average WWE wrestler is on the road over 250 days a year. For stars needed to do PR and promotional work, that number can be a lot higher.
I got home this weekend and it was the first time in 63 jam-packed days.
With that schedule, it's no surprise that so many wrestlers choose to date their coworkers. Who else could understand that type of lifestyle and dedication to a job? Of the 30 competitors in the 2019 Women's Royal Rumble match, at least 24 are currently or have been in a publicly reported relationship with another figure in the wrestling business. For the Men's Royal Rumble, I count 12 out of the 30. This phenomena is so common in the wrestling industry, it's almost surprising to see a wrestler date someone who isn't in the business. Ultimately, some of these relationships lead to marriage, most just fade away without much comment. But occasionally, one blows up in such a spectacular fashion that everyone stops and takes notice. In 2005, Amy Dumas's 5-year relationship with boyfriend Matt Hardy ended due to a very public affair with fellow wrestler Adam Copeland. The fallout of this breakup resulted in the WWE firing Hardy, but fan outrage led to his return in one of the most memorable work shoots of all time. This is the third video in a 3-part series covering the Matt Hardy, Edge, and Lita love triangle. In mid-2004, Matt Hardy, Lita, and Kane entered into an on-screen love triangle from hell that more closely resembled the ridiculous plot of some soap opera than a wrestling angle. This storyline ended with Kane impregnating Lita and eventually marrying her against her will, and Hardy was written off television in order to receive knee surgery. Although separated in storyline, behind the scenes, Matt and Lita remained in a serious romantic relationship that had been ongoing for several years. The two met at an indie show in 1999 prior to Lita signing with the WWE. They hit it off as friends right away, but didn't start dating until about a year later. And in February of 2001, their real-life relationship was brought to television. The two bonded over their love of wrestling and their shared journey to live out their dreams. And in later interviews, both have actually spoken pretty positively about their relationship at the time. Jeff Hardy reported that he thought Matt and Lita would stay together forever, and actually flat out refused to take part in an angle that would have required him to kiss Lita, threatening to walk away from the company if necessary. While Matt was at home rehabbing his knee, Lita remained on the road as Kane's on-screen wife, and took part in another ridiculous storyline involving the death of her unborn son at the hands of Gene Snitsky. Professional wrestlers are independent contractors, and with the exception of airfare, they're usually responsible for their own expenses and transportation. A typical loop might involve a 700-mile road trip over the weekend. So for financial reasons and mental well-being, wrestlers rarely travel alone. With Matt on the injured list, Lita began riding with other travel partners, one of which was Adam Copeland, better known to WWE fans as Edge. Edge made his WWE debut in 1998 as a loner with a lost soul who entered through the crowd and hung out in empty subway stations. His on-screen brother Christian was introduced later in the year, and the two joined Gangrel to create the Brood, a clan of quasi-vampires. Gangrel eventually betrayed Edge and Christian, dissolving the group, and the two continued as what quickly became a hugely successful tag team, morphing into a couple of Bill and Ted-esque comedy heels in the process. Their TLC matches against the Hardys and Dudleys raised the bar in terms of risk-taking, and are some of the greatest matches of all time. After 7 World Tag Championship reigns, the team imploded in 2001, and Edge began to establish himself as a singles competitor. However, following a 2002 no DQ match with Eddie Guerrero, Edge began experiencing numbness in his neck and arms on a regular basis, which would eventually worsen and result in neck surgery that sidelined him for over a year. He made his return in 2004, turning heel at Taboo Tuesday after abandoning his tag partner Chris Benoit. At the time Edge began traveling with Lita, he was in the middle of a slow rise to the main event and was arguably the best heel in the business. Although they'd spent the majority of their on-screen careers as heated rivals, Matt Hardy and Edge were actually close friends behind the scenes. Matt and Lita had even attended Edge's wedding just a month prior in October 2004, and Matt had no problem with Edge and Lita riding together. But after spending long hours in the car over the next weeks and months, Edge and Lita began to grow closer. In a 2017 interview, Lita stated that her neck injury in 2002 forced her to consider her life beyond wrestling for the first time, and she felt disconnected from Matt. Like once their careers were over, there'd be no bond left to hold them together.
She says, oh my God, I'm gonna have to be out for a year. And I go, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about a year. Don't worry about wrestling. And I'm not worried about anything in the immediate future. I just want her to get fixed up so that 20 years from now we can walk around the zoo and eat popcorn.
As she and Edge spent more time alone, they began to connect on a deeper level. Despite how this relationship was later presented on screen, in interviews, Matt and Lita have both downplayed the physicality of this affair, claiming that it was much more of a mental connection. In fact, Lita claims that she and Edge freaked out the first night they kissed, around the same time she tore her ACL in January of 2005, and they took the opportunity to let the relationship cool and reevaluate what they were doing. Matt was first alerted that something might be going on by Edge's wife, who called saying that she discovered a text message to Lita on Edge's phone that read, "I'm going to miss seeing you on the road. Love you." Matt called Edge for an explanation, but he didn't answer. He then called Lita, who wrote it off as just a friendly message. However, she eventually admitted that she and Edge had become close on the road, but still insisted that there was nothing going on. Hardy was upset about this, and the next couple of days were very tense. But as Lita was now also injured and at home with Hardy, his concerns eventually faded away. That is until Valentine's Day, when Matt came home with a number of presents, but Lita hadn't bought him anything. This led Matt to check Lita's phone that night, and he found a missed call from Edge. He confronted her about this discovery, and she again played it off as nothing, but admitted that she was at a crossroads in her life and was unsure about their future. They argued off and on for the next few days, but resolved nothing. At this point, Hardy called Edge and point blank asked him if they were having an affair, which he of course denied. Hardy then warned him to not call or text her again. But what Matt didn't know is Lita had a second cell phone hidden away. She was booked for an appearance and left town for the weekend, leaving the phone turned off. During this time, Edge called and left multiple voicemails, fully laying out his intentions and his feelings towards her. When Lita returned home, she went to bed without checking her messages, and early that morning, Matt discovered the second phone and listened to the voicemails. At that point, all hell broke loose. Matt stormed into the bedroom, ripping the covers off the bed and yelling,
"We're gonna play a little game called Tell the Fucking Truth."
But not before calling Edge's wife and playing her the messages. Completely enraged, Matt threw Lita out and threatened Edge, who called sobbing and apologizing. Although deeply hurt, Matt still wanted to repair the relationship. He claims to have had multiple conversations with Edge and Lita over the next few days that went nowhere. Fed up, he told Shane McMahon about the affair, resulting in word leaking to the locker room. Matt took down all the photos of Lita around the house and sent word to his webmaster to remove her pictures from his personal website. When a fan noticed the photos were suddenly gone and naturally asked why, Matt replied, "Ask her." Of course, this led to the story breaking. In a world where a retired referee's birthday counts as news, and forgetting to shake someone's hand is considered a scandal, one wrestler stealing another's girlfriend was a pretty big deal. But of course, this is far from the only real-life wrestling love triangle. It's not even the only one involving Matt Hardy. In 1997, Kevin Sullivan essentially booked his own divorce after devising a storyline that saw Chris Benoit begin an affair with his wife, Woman. This on-screen affair soon turned into a real-life romance, and she left Sullivan for Benoit that same year. In 2007, Jeff Jarrett began an affair with Kurt Angle's soon-to-be ex-wife Karen. After rumors of the affair began to spread, TNA owner Dixie Carter confronted Jarrett, demanding an explanation. Jarrett lied to Dixie, denying the affair, which led to his suspension when the truth was revealed by an anonymous TNA employee who called into the Bubba the Love Sponge radio show. Matt Hardy and his close friends began openly discussing the affair on his message board, which angered WWE management. Even Edge's wife eventually chimed in, trashing Lita and accusing Edge of steroid abuse. Matt was scheduled to return to WWE television on the March 7, 2005 episode of Raw, which originated from Raleigh, North Carolina, but was told by John Laurinaitis to stay home, as the company didn't want his personal life affecting the product. During Edge's match that night, small "You Screwed Matt" chants could be heard off and on.
I hate having to hit my head on anything other than a headboard.
And a fan at ringside had a pretty noticeable sign. But Lita returned to TV later in the show to a pretty big pop, and no audible chants at all. Regardless, Matt was pulled from all house shows in the immediate future. Realizing that this conflict was starting to affect his career, he arranged a meeting with Edge and Lita in a hotel room that night in Raleigh. This was the first time he'd seen either of them since he'd discovered the affair. There was a draft coming up, and Matt wanted Edge to move to SmackDown so that he and Lita could work on their relationship. But Edge admitted that he was in love with Lita and didn't want to switch shows. In an attempt to convince the office that he could exist in the same locker room as Edge, Matt showed up to the house show in Fayetteville, North Carolina that he'd been asked not to attend. The next day, Edge discovered that the tires on his rental car had been slashed. Shortly thereafter, John Laurinaitis called, informing Matt that the V1 character had run its course and that he was being released. Matt claims that Joey Abs, formerly of the Mean Street Posse, had a bone to pick with him, and spread a rumor that he put a hit out on Edge. But since they couldn't get to him, they vandalized his car instead. From the company's perspective, firing Matt Hardy was probably a pretty easy decision. Edge and Lita were ingrained in ongoing storylines, and removing either of them would have required a creative reshuffle. While Matt had been off television for several months and was an unproven draw as a singles competitor. Additionally, Matt was the one stirring up fans with details of the affair online. Laurinaitis claims that Matt was warned about handling the situation maturely multiple times before his firing. Nevertheless, this time there was a strong and immediate backlash from fans and wrestlers alike.
How could you be sitting at home rehabbing your knee and a month later you lose your girlfriend and your job for doing nothing wrong? You know what I mean?
That is rough.
Yeah, it's the shits.
In later interviews, Edge and Lita reported being completely ostracized in the locker room, and both called this period the most stressful of their careers. The April 18th episode of Raw saw Lita come out to what can only be described as nuclear heat.
Excuse me, we are trying to have a conversation here, people.
The incensed crowd loudly chanted, "You screwed Matt," among other things throughout this segment.
Oh no, this is new.
All right. Don't call her a slut.
Dirt Sheets reported the next day that Lita was shaken by this reaction. Matt issued a statement on his official message board thanking the fans for their support. With Lita continuing to receive an increasingly negative and hostile fan reaction, WWE officials were left with little choice but to either make her the face of the company or turn her heel for the first time in her career. A Gold Rush tournament to determine the #1 contender to Batista's World Heavyweight Championship was announced on the May 2nd, 2005 episode of Raw. 2 weeks later, Edge and Kane faced off in the final round of this tournament. Although Kane had previously kidnapped and arguably raped Lita before forcing her to marry him, the death of their child and their shared pursuit of revenge against abortion enthusiast Gene Snitsky had caused the couple to form an unlikely bond. But in the final moments of this match, Lita betrayed Kane, revealing herself to have colluded with her new lover, Edge. The next week's Raw opened with a long promo, during which Lita ran down Kane's numerous past discrepancies and claimed that she was finally with a real man, which was kinda harsh considering he literally won her in a fight. Edge declared that they owed no one any explanations or apologies. Although this was a kayfabe promo, it was pretty easy to read between the lines. Kane, who broke down in tears watching the monitor backstage, was recast as a sort of on-screen proxy for Hardy and entered into an ill-fated feud with the couple. Lita announced she'd filed for divorce on the next week's Raw, shortly before flushing her wedding ring down the toilet. The week after that, she called out Gene Snitsky to personally thank him for killing her baby. The June 20th episode of Raw saw Lita walk down the aisle on WWE television for the second time in 9 months. Family friend Gene Snitsky recited a sentimental poem to celebrate the occasion.
It's not my fault the things that love can do to us. Just like it's not my fault you had a dead baby in your uterus.
And Lita's vows were particularly heartfelt.
But if falling in love with you makes me a slut, well then I'm proud. I am proud to be the slut of the century.
The crowd turned on this segment almost immediately.
And not a monster.
But lost their minds when a familiar song filled the arena.
If there's anybody here that feels these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, very well then.
Unfortunately, it was all a cruel joke, and instead Kane broke through the ring canvas and ruined the ceremony. On commentary, Jim Ross referred to this event as the most bizarre wedding in WWE history, apparently forgetting that The Undertaker nearly wed Stephanie McMahon while she was strapped to a makeshift crucifix. Kane actually defeated Edge that Sunday at Vengeance, but much like his real-life counterpart, he seemed to have trouble moving on. Following his release, Matt Hardy began to act increasingly unhinged.
And you're going to stay here in this bathroom for the remainder of the day, and you're not getting any food, and you're not getting any water. And if you get out of line, I'm going to fucking punch you in the eye. So if you stand here in this bathroom, every time I come in here and have to do a number 2, I'm going to leave it in here and lock the door and make you smell it all day. It's going to be your punishment for the rest of your life.
Redubbing himself Angelic Diablo, a man who lost everything, and discussing the affair at great length with basically anyone with a microphone who asked. He even filmed a detailed reenactment of the breakup, which was released on DVD. The July 11, 2005 episode of Raw featured a rematch between Edge and Kane scheduled for the main event. As Edge walked through the backstage area immediately before the match, he was suddenly attacked by Hardy, who fled out the back door as soon as WWE agents intervened. The show returned from break with no mention of Hardy or anything that just happened, and Edge and Kane had a short match that ended in disqualification due to interference by Gene Snitsky. As Kane and Snitsky brawled through the crowd, Matt Hardy jumped the guardrail, attacking Edge once more. Security swarmed both men, who really did appear to be slugging it out. Finally separated, Matt Hardy grabbed the microphone and delivered some choice words for the couple, addressing Edge by his real name, before plugging his upcoming Ring of Honor appearance and being removed by uniform officers. The commentator said nothing during this segment and didn't acknowledge that anything out of the ordinary had happened when the show came back from commercial. Hardy's return was a slam dunk, and needless to say, people bought this hook, line, and sinker. From the shaky cam, did I really just see that backstage attack, to the utter chaos at the end, everything about this seemed realistic. Dirt sheets had speculated that Hardy's return to the company was imminent as far back as May. He'd even been directly referenced during an infamous promo by Paul Heyman during the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, which was approved by both Vince and Edge according to The Observer.
Hide your wives! It's Edge! I have 2 words for you. Matt freaking Hardy!
However, the idea was actually pitched by longtime creative team member Bruce Pritchard, who was then tasked with getting Edge and Lita to agree to work the angle. Both initially refused, understandably not wanting their private lives turned into a wrestling storyline, but an agreement was eventually reached. The Observer reported that the deal was finalized shortly before their on-screen wedding. In later interviews, Edge has stated that he realized that from the company's perspective, this feud was worth a lot of money, and he saw it as the bed he'd have to lie in. For Lita, guilt seemed to be the primary motivator, as agreeing to work with Hardy was the only way he'd be rehired by the company. This was an emotionally taxing experience for her, and she stated that it took everything she had just to get on the plane every week and go to work so Matt Hardy could keep his job. Hardy's return was kept under close secrecy, and he was hidden away from other talent that night. A car picked him up midway through the show, and Bruce Pritchard and Edge joined Hardy in the back seat to discuss the angle when he arrived. Despite the bad blood, both men shook hands and behaved professionally towards one another. 2 days later, Matt called in to Bite This, a WWE.com internet talk show hosted by Todd Grisham. Except this was 2005, so the video looked closer to this. Matt confronted Lita, and what followed was actually a fairly calm conversation with both sides making valid points. Lita claimed she'd simply fallen in love with someone else and that there was no reason for Matt to bring it public. Matt responded that he'd left the promising position on SmackDown in order to join her on Raw for the sake of their relationship, and that her heat with The Office had nearly killed his career. Echoing their previous breakup angle in 2003, he claimed that he loved her more than wrestling, but that she couldn't say the same, and that going forward, he planned to make her life miserable. Although this was a worked segment, and Lita later stated that the dismissive attitude she displayed here was the complete opposite of her true feelings. Even watching it now, almost 15 years later, it still feels like a real couple having a real argument. However, in The Observer, Meltzer noted that Lita came off like the babyface, and Matt the crazed ex-boyfriend, comparing him to Brian Pillman's loose cannon persona. He reported that there was heat on Matt after the show, as management felt he'd gone on too much about Lita dumping him, and that fans wouldn't support a guy who couldn't stop whining. The next Monday on Raw, Edge cut a scathing promo on Matt Hardy, and the internet marks obsessed with his personal life. Later that night, Matt Hardy jumped the guardrail again and attempted to attack Edge before his steel cage match with Kane. On commentary, JR referred to Hardy as simply a fan and provided no other comment. Hardy fled from security through the crowd, and Edge went on the win by escaping the cage. Kane and Edge squared off in a stretcher match the next week, which Edge also won thanks to assistance from Lita. However, Hardy struck again, attacking after the match before being restrained. On the bright side, Kane got to live out the fantasy of many divorced men as he tombstoned his ex-wife on the metal entrance ramp, then kidnapped her in the responding ambulance. But nothing ever came of this, and it was really never mentioned again. Kane was simply removed from the angle and taken off television. The next week on Raw, Vince McMahon announced that he was doing what was best for business and re-signing Matt Hardy, who would face Edge at SummerSlam. The original plan had actually been for Edge to take on Cena at the event, but their feud was postponed until the next year, and Jericho filled the spot instead. Matt Hardy came out and cut a worked shoot promo that completely buried the previous 9 months of television, admitting that the entire saga with Kane had been nothing but a wrestling angle, and filling in anyone who didn't know about Lita's affair behind his back. This promo, which was written by Matt himself, was roundly criticized, with one of the closing lines being especially controversial, and earning a mixed response from the crowd that was otherwise strongly behind Hardy.
And the only thing that would make me more happy than permanently injuring you, Edge, or ending your career, is if you were killed in a car accident before I had the chance.
The decision to have Vince McMahon simply rehire Hardy was also questionable. For the previous few weeks, Hardy had been presented as a lone wolf rebel who was disrupting WWE television in order to seek revenge against the man, woman, and company that wronged him. But here he was, back as just another guy on the roster.
And the WWE can kiss my ass!
Edge responded the next week in a fiery backstage promo that was arguably one of the best of his career. He claimed that it was his idea to rehire Matt Hardy, as he saw their match at SummerSlam as an opportunity to commit legalized assault. He went on to bury Hardy's promo from the previous week, calling his lack of intensity pathetic and claiming that they weren't in the same league.
And why are you here? Because your girlfriend fell in love with a main eventer.
The match at SummerSlam began as a wild brawl on the outside, with Matt Hardy the aggressor. However, Edge took back control with a headbutt and some blows of his own, before hitting a spear through the ropes, sending both men crashing to the outside. After briefly teasing a double countout, they returned to the ring, where Hardy attempted a comeback with some right hands and elbows in the corner, before being dumped by Edge headfirst into the ring post, lacerating his forehead. Ever the opportunist, Edge went to work beating Hardy senseless, pummeling him with stiff punches, knee strikes, and kicks. As Matt Hardy faded due to blood loss and could no longer defend himself, the referee had no choice but to end the match, awarding Edge the victory by knockout in 4 minutes, 50 seconds. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter awarded this match 2 stars, noting that the finish defied logic and was undermined by the Shawn Michaels Hulk Hogan match later in the night, which saw Hogan bleeding more severely without even any tease of the match being stopped. Meltzer further speculated that the match's placement on the card and Hardy not appearing on the Go Home Raw despite being backstage indicated that getting the feud over wasn't a priority for the company, as the storyline wasn't their creation. Readers were even harsher, voting the match the worst of the night. Hardy's luck went from bad to worse the next night on Raw, as he suffered a clean loss to Rob Conway, while Edge and Lita set in on commentary. Since his firing, Hardy had begun using the catchphrase,
Matt Hardy will not
not die!
And his character began to shift to someone who always loses, but never quits. The next week, Edge and Hardy squared off in an absolutely brutal street fight, which ended with both men falling from the entrance ramp and being removed from the arena on stretchers. Although somewhat overbooked with the electrical sparks, this was played up as legit, and Edge was actually shown crying as Lita stroked his hair. Despite the seriousness of their injuries, as luck would have it, both men recovered in time to work the next house show 4 days later, and appeared on Raw the following Monday, where Eric Bischoff announced that they'd compete in a steel cage match at Unforgiven. Hardy even had a match that night, taking on Gene Snitsky in a losing effort while Edge and Lita provided commentary. He teamed with the Big Show the next week on the Go Home Raw to take on Edge and Snitsky in yet another loss. Afterwards, Lita further humiliated Hardy by laying him out with his own finisher. Despite the losing streak, the crowd had largely stuck by Matt Hardy up to this point, admiring his tenacity and viewing him as a sympathetic babyface. However, there's a difference between falling and getting back up and then just not having what it takes in the first place. Going into Unforgiven, Hardy was definitely walking a fine line. Unforgiven 2005 originated from Oklahoma City in front of a crowd of approximately 8,000. Hardy cut a backstage promo immediately before the match, insulting Lita and denying that he still had any feelings for her, which was sort of an odd question for Todd Grisham to even ask in the first place. The match opened with a long stare down, building a big match feel that was absent from their two previous encounters. Sufficiently enraged, they locked up, but neither was able to gain the offense and they resorted to trading fists instead. Both men attempted to use the cage to no avail, and the slugfest resumed, with Hardy hitting Edge with either the greatest worked punch I've ever seen or a straight up live round that must have hurt like hell. Irish whip into the corner, and Edge used the momentum to mount an escape attempt. However, Hardy was close behind, headbutting him off the top rope and following it up with a double axe handle. Back on the ground, Hardy grabbed a headlock, which Edge countered with a bat suplex, but Hardy held on, refusing to break the hold. An Irish whip was followed by a shoulder tackle, and Hardy resumed the headlock, leaving Edge no choice but to gouge the eyes. Another escape attempt by Edge was stopped by Hardy, who then hit a very stiff clothesline, leading to the first pin attempt of this match. Back on their feet, Hardy blocked the charge in the corner and followed it up with a clothesline from the second rope. Feeding off the crowd, he attempted the twist of fate, which Edge was able to counter into the Edge-o-matic, resulting in another failed pin attempt. Frustrated and exhausted, Edge again attempted to escape the cage, leading to both men brawling on the top rope. After ramming Hardy's head into the steel border, Edge followed him down with a missile dropkick that didn't really look like it connected at all. A combination of bat suplexes left Hardy unable to stand, and Edge taunted the crowd, flashing Hardy's hand symbol before returning to punishing his nearly defenseless opponent. A DDT was followed shortly by a series of unsuccessful pin attempts, and then a powerbomb into the steel cage, and another into the turnbuckle. Hardy was able to prevent a bat suplex from the middle rope, but Edge quickly recovered, delivering a devastating third powerbomb that laid out both men. Edge slowly came back to life, breaking the referee's 10 count and going for the cover, but Matt Hardy survived, kicking out at 2 3/4. Disgusted, Edge began toying with his opponent, leaving Hardy no choice but to bite his fingers in desperation. They fought their way to the corner, where Hardy connected with the snake eyes, then a side effect for a 2 count. Edge climbed towards the cage door, allowing Lita her chance to introduce the Money in the Bank briefcase, but his attack missed, and Hardy tangled Edge in the ropes, decimating him with stiff left and right hooks as the crowd became unglued. Slingshot into the cage, and Hardy ignored his opportunity for an easy victory, preferring to stay and punish his opponent. Repeated javelin throws into the steel fabric lacerated Edge's forehead, and Hardy continued his abuse, delivering numerous stiff shots to the head. Ready to dial up the carnage, Hardy attempted an attack from the top rope, which was prevented by a ref bump, and Edge capitalized with a spear into the cage. He made another escape attempt, but Hardy recovered and executed a side effect, which Edge sold like a rag doll. Slowly, Hardy went for the cover, but Lita rushed through the door, breaking the pinfall. As she and Matt argued, Edge selfishly crawled towards the exit. Although he didn't get far, Lita used the distraction to attempt to blindside Hardy with the briefcase, earning her a twist of fate as payback. The brief reprieve gave Edge his chance, and he surprised Hardy with a spear, which nearly earned a pinfall. In disbelief, Edge tried to leave the cage, but Hardy returned to his feet, bashing Edge's head against the steel. With Edge laid out below, Hardy climbed to the very top of the structure and executed an absolutely insane lead drop from the cage. With one arm, he reached over and covered Edge for the win at 21 minutes 33 seconds. The match at Unforgiven was awarded 4 1/4 stars in the Wrestling Observer newsletter and voted match of the night by its readers. Dave Meltzer described it as both the show saver and show stealer. and noted that while the lead drop from the top of the cage was cool, he hoped for Hardy's sake that he never did it again. It's no surprise that this was a great match. These guys built their careers wrestling each other. They didn't need to get along in order to work together. The booking of this match, which saw Matt finally triumph after so many setbacks and exposed Edge as a selfish opportunist, was perfect, and the intensity and brutality throughout the entire 20 minutes was exactly as it needed to be. Although there have been no issues while the three were working together, WWE management felt that keeping Hardy on the same roster as Edge and Lita would be too big of a distraction, and he was defeated by Edge in a loser leaves Raw ladder match 2 weeks later. The Money in the Bank briefcase was also on the line during this match. You could call this 50-50 booking, but in this case, it was really the only option. Edge was being pushed as an antagonist for Cena, and ultimately needed to go over at the end of this feud. But at the same time, Matt Hardy was walking away having lost his girlfriend and his show. If he was going to continue with the company as a featured babyface, he needed the win at Unforgiven. Most fans agreed that this angle benefited Edge immensely, and that he used the fans' hatred to become an even bigger star. He won the first of his 11 world championships just months later. He remained one of the company's top stars until his retirement in 2011 due to neck injuries. Matt Hardy had varying degrees of success in the mid-card until he was released in 2010 after being sent home from a European tour due to suspicions he was under the influence, and posting videos on his YouTube channel expressing his disinterest in remaining with the WWE. He signed with TNA in early 2011, but was released that same year due to mounting legal problems. However, he was rehired in 2014 and eventually developed the broken Matt Hardy character, which earned widespread critical acclaim. In 2017, he made a surprise return to the WWE at WrestleMania 33 and has remained with the company since then. Lita continued to manage Edge for the next year and also had 2 more runs with the WWE Women's Championship before her retirement match at Survivor Series 2006. Her decision to retire was partially based on the real-life heat generated by this angle, which had spilled over into her personal life with angry fans calling her names and attempting to shame her while out in public. For a while, the infamy of this affair kind of overshadowed Lita's accomplishments in the ring, but with the emergence of women's wrestling as a mainstream draw in North America, she's now regarded as a major influence and early pioneer of the women's movement. By all reports, the relationship between Edge and Lita was short-lived, lasting only a matter of weeks. In a later interview, Lita claimed that it was too tainted from the beginning. Despite Matt's repeated claim that Edge took away his only opportunity to ever have a family, he's now married to Rebby Sky, and they recently announced that they're expecting a 3rd son. Edge is now a father to 2 little girls and married to former women's champion Beth Phoenix. Lita was linked to special effects artist Shannon Morton, who played in her band, and was also in a relationship with CM Punk for a time. Matt Hardy eventually forgave Edge, and the two appear to have a pretty friendly relationship nowadays. Matt claimed to be on good terms with Lita from early on, and aside from an angry tweet by his wife in 2017, that seems to be generally true. The WWE managed to capture real-life drama and deliver an intense feud that the fans wanted to see. That Matt, Edge, and Lita were able to put aside their personal differences and work together to tell this story says a lot about all three. Edge and Lita have already been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and it's almost certain that Hardy will join them when he retires. The early part of the 2010s was a bit of a dull time to be a WWE fan. In the preceding few years, the company had seen the departure of several high-profile stars, but had struggled in their attempts to replace them. As a result, the WWE was left with a paper-thin roster, which featured a laptop computer as one of the company's top heels, followed closely by the flagship show's lead announcer. But it was during this otherwise unremarkable time in the WWE's history that one of wrestling's biggest stars broke through the glass ceiling. CM Punk made his WWE debut on the July 4th, 2006 episode of ECW on Sci-Fi to a strong reception but facing an uncertain future. Punk's years in the independents had earned him a reputation as the king of the indies, which carried a negative connotation in the WWE at the time. Additionally, he had the distinction of being Paul Heyman's golden boy, the two having worked closely together in OVW, which longtime creative team member Michael Hayes admitted hurt Punk, as Paul Heyman was seen by WWE management as a contrarian, known for embellishing the strengths of unlikely stars. Nonetheless, Punk received a slow but steady push in ECW, eventually winning the brand's title in September of 2007. He'd actually been chosen by Paul Heyman to win the championship in the main event of the WWE incarnation of ECW's only pay-per-view, December to Dismember, but this decision was overruled by Vince McMahon, who decided to put the belt on Bobby Lashley instead. Punk won the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 24 and was drafted to Raw a few months later, cashing in his briefcase against Edge to win the World Heavyweight Heavyweight Championship his first night with the brand. After being forced to forfeit the title due to an attack by the Legacy, Punk again won the Money in the Bank contract at WrestleMania 25, this time moving to SmackDown and cashing in against Jeff Hardy at the end of Extreme Rules in 2009. After dropping the championship back to Hardy, then regaining it in the main event of SummerSlam, Punk lost the belt to The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match and began to take on the persona of a cult-like savior, offering salvation through his straight-edge lifestyle. He returned to Raw in October of 2010, spending time on commentary for a while due to a hip injury, before assuming control of the Nexus, who he used to seek revenge against Orton for costing him his world title back in 2008. CM Punk's road to the WWE Championship began on the June 20th, 2011 episode of Raw, where Punk opened the show by taking a seat in the ring thanks to a distraction by R-Truth, so his demand wasn't entirely unreasonable. Punk threatened to hijack the show, literally making snow angels in the ring until the Raw Anonymous general manager scheduled a triple threat match that night between Punk, Rey Mysterio, and Alberto Del Rio to determine the #1 contender for the WWE Championship. Punk pinned Del Rio to win the match, and in the promo afterward, revealed for the first time that his contract would end after the Money in the Bank pay-per-view on July 17th. He promised that he'd be leaving the WWE with the title in hand. This angle mirrored a similar storyline from Punk's last months in Ring of Honor, where he threatened to abscond with their world title, going as far as to sign his WWE contract on top of the Ring of Honor World Championship belt. In The Observer, Dave Meltzer reported that Punk's contract ending was real, and that the creative team had been told that he'd be gone after Money in the Bank. According to Punk, he'd been burnt out and unsatisfied with his position for some time, and had decided to leave the WWE over a year earlier, dodging the company's attempts to re-sign him, and that he'd been held back by his refusal to suck up to Vince McMahon, comparing himself to Brock Lesnar, who'd walked out on the company several years earlier. Punk name-dropped Hulk Hogan and The Rock, attributing their success to kissing Vince McMahon's ass, and accusing Cena of following the same path. He claimed that after he captured the WWE Championship at Money in the Bank, he might go defend the title in New Japan, or return to Ring of Honor. He closed by addressing speculation that the WWE would improve after Vince McMahon's death, which he felt was unlikely, as the company would then be taken over by his doofus son-in-law and his idiotic daughter. As he launched into a personal story about Vince McMahon and the company's anti-bullying campaign, Punk's mic was cut and the show went off the air. Needless to say, people lost their minds over this promo. No one had ever seen anything like this. Past and present WWE stars took to Twitter to comment on the angle, with Stone Cold Steve Austin claiming Punk's promo had so much heat it melted his TV. There wasn't even a clear consensus at first whether or not this was part of the show. A lot of people initially believed that Punk had been legitimately shooting on the company. At the time, the WWE was undertaking a ridiculous marketing push to distance itself from the term wrestling, preferring to call what they do simply entertainment. In one case, a WWE publicist actually harassed journalist Chuck Ross for having the gall to refer to the 2001 Royal Rumble as a wrestling event, insisting that the company did not hold wrestling events. They held entertainments. That Punk referred to himself as the best wrestler in the world did not go unnoticed. But of course, this promo wasn't actually a shoot. And even though it so effectively blurred the lines between what's scripted and what's real, there was actually nothing said here that directly broke kayfabe. WWE.com announced later that night that CM Punk had been indefinitely suspended for his unprofessional conduct, before later updating the story to clarify that Punk would continue to work house shows. Cena cut a promo the next week criticizing the WWE's decision to suspend Punk for speaking his mind and demanding answers from Vince McMahon himself. Vince claimed that Punk was being unreasonable in his contract negotiations and that he couldn't risk having the WWE title taken to another company. Cena and McMahon argued back and forth, with Cena stating that Punk had earned his title shot and that if he didn't get it, the championship was worthless. After Cena handed over his belt and began to make his way to the back, McMahon finally relented, announcing that the match at Money in the Bank would go forward as previously scheduled, but that John Cena would be fired if Punk walked out of Chicago as the world champion. In The Observer, Meltzer reported that Vince's line about Punk's contract demands being unreasonable reflected the real-life situation, as multiple sources had told him that Punk's demands to stay were legitimately very high, much higher than someone in his position would normally receive, even claiming that Punk was demanding a main roster position for his close friend Colt Cabana, who he'd name-dropped during the promo. Ironically, every person Punk mentioned during this promo, except Colt Cabana, would eventually return to WWE television. Going into Money in the Bank, fact, Punk actually made headlines for using homophobic language towards a fan during a house show in Australia on July 4th, which embarrassed the company due to their affiliation with GLAAD. Officials at GLAAD were reportedly told by WWE management the next day, this departure is not part of a storyline. He is contractually leaving the organization. Although the so-called pipe bomb promo had actually been intended to get Punk over as a heel, with Punk even directly attacking the fans for the lack of support, it ended up having the complete opposite effect, and CM Punk walked into Money in the Bank in front of a red-hot crowd in his hometown of Chicago as the biggest babyface in wrestling, go to sleep to win the WWE Championship before fleeing the arena, title in hand. In later interviews, Punk claims to have re-signed his deal midway through the pay-per-view after much soul-searching and advice from friends who told him that he could help undervalued WWE performers by staying. The next night on Raw, Vince McMahon cut a promo disavowing CM Punk, who he called an ingrate, whose name would never again be mentioned on WWE television. Vince announced a single elimination tournament to crown a new WWE champion, and later in the night confronted John Cena about the consequences of losing his title. Cena thanked Punk for a hard-fought match and made thinly veiled references about joining TNA if McMahon went through with his threat to fire him.
If you make me walk tonight, then I will walk on someone else's television show and keep doing this, brother.
Suddenly, Triple H made his way to the ring. Triple H had recently returned at WrestleMania 27 after taking several months off to recover from injuries and begin his transition to a behind-the-scenes executive position. He had retired from a full-time schedule at this point, having worked only one televised match in the last year. Hunter informed Vince that he'd just come from a meeting with the board of directors, who were concerned about Vince's judgment as of late, and had filed an injunction with a vote of no confidence. He added that the board had appointed him to take over the day-to-day operations of the company, and as such, he would not be firing John Cena, which everyone basically assumed anyway, as the WWE had run a Cena gets fired angle less than a year earlier, which didn't even last a month. CM Punk, still kayfabe gone from the company, spent the night enjoying a Chicago Cubs game, and also crashed the San Diego Comic-Con a few days later to confront Triple H during Mattel's WWE panel. The next week on Raw, Rey Mysterio defeated The Miz in the final round of the WWE Championship Tournament to win the title for the first time in his career. However, his reign only lasted a little over an hour, as he was defeated by John Cena later in the night in his first title defense. As Cena helped Rey to his feet, the sound of Cult of Personality filled the arena, referencing Triple H's so-called golden shovel, which has been discussed at great length online. Punk's words here were obviously scripted. The truth is, Triple H coming out of his quasi-retirement to insert himself into this angle was cause for concern, especially after Hunter announced that he would personally serve as special guest referee during the Cena vs. Punk title unification match at SummerSlam.
John Cena vs. CM Punk, one-on-one, that should sell tickets right there, but no, Triple H needs that spotlight.
At this point, even TNA tried to get in on the action, shamelessly announcing on their website that Punk's matches with the company early in his career had been added to their on-demand service. Although the story leading up to SummerSlam had mostly focused on the tension between Punk and Triple H, it was actually Cena who ended up getting screwed, as Hunter counted a pinfall while Cena's leg was clearly on the bottom rope. This was poorly executed as Cena placed his foot on the rope. Nevertheless, the pinfall stood, but as Punk celebrated his victory, a face from the past seemingly appeared out of nowhere, laying him out with a jackknife powerbomb. Seeing his opportunity, Money in the Bank holder Alberto Del Rio cashed in his briefcase, robbing CM Punk of his title. The return of Kevin Nash, one of the biggest stars of the 90s, was quite a shock. Nash had been absent from the WWE since SummerSlam 2003, after leaving the company to film a scene for the 2004 Thomas Jane movie, The Punisher. He'd spent the preceding years working for TNA, mostly in a non-wrestling capacity.
Amazing Grace, how sweet. Time out.
But it made a one-night-only return as his former character Diesel at the 2011 Royal Rumble, which was well received. Why 52-year-old Kevin Nash would be attacking the company's new top babyface at the end of the second biggest pay-per-view of the year was a bit of a mystery to everyone. Adding to that, Vince McMahon was high on Alberto Del Rio at the time and wanted him to carry the world title through the company's house show tour of Mexico. Having Punk work with Nash would put Punk in a holding pattern, but keep him at the top of the cards. The next night on Raw, Triple H addressed the controversy at SummerSlam, apologizing for his poor officiating and claiming that he had no involvement in Nash's attack on Punk. Kevin Nash and Triple H were members of the Clique, a group of WWE wrestlers who banded together in the 90s to use their star power to exercise backstage control over the WWE's booking. Although they'd had their kayfabe issues, the real-life relationship between Triple H and Kevin Nash was well known to fans. Hunter claimed that Nash had simply texted him asking for tickets to the show, which he left at will call, and that was it. Later in the night, Kevin Nash cut a promo claiming that he attended SummerSlam as a fan, despite the event taking place over 2,500 miles away from his home, but had received a text saying, "No matter what happens in the main event, stick the winner for me," which he assumed was from Triple H as it came from his phone. But Hunter denied sending the text, claiming to know nothing about it. CM Punk interrupted this promo, saying that he received a text message of his own that night from his sister, who wrote,
"OMG, Kevin Nash? WTF, thought he was dead, LOL."
What followed was rather pointless verbal sparring, with Nash calling Punk indie-rific, and Punk responding that Nash didn't know what was good for business. Nowhere in this long, convoluted exchange, which ended with CM Punk backing down from a few bored-looking security jobbers, did anyone attempt to establish him. On commentary, Michael Cole admitted that this segment had left him even more confused than before. In a later interview, Kevin Nash stated that he was unhappy with the script for this promo, which saw Punk making jokes about his age, with Nash giving basically no retort. "Let me get this straight. I cost you the world title, and you're gonna do stand-up comedy and bury me because I'm old?" According to Nash, he went through with the segment due to his loyalty to Triple H, even though his involvement wasn't initially planned to last past SummerSlam. The Observer reported that Nash refused to do scripted promos going forward, and Meltzer stated that Nash had showed up in great shape but having difficulty walking due to his numerous knee surgeries. He reported that the feeling backstage was that a Nash vs Punk match, should the WWE go in that direction, would not be pretty. Triple H announced that a rematch between Punk and Cena to determine the #1 contender to Del Rio's WWE title would headline the show that night. Later, he called Kevin Nash to the ring to set the record straight about the attack at SummerSlam. Nash had been shown walking around backstage and shaking hands with a crew member earlier in the night, which Meltzer reported was a dig at Booker T's heat with the Young Bucks over a missed handshake at their recent tryout match. Triple H once again denied any involvement, and Nash claimed that he'd originally come to apologize to Punk, but after dwelling on their encounter last week, he wanted a fight instead. This led Punk to make his way to the ring, getting in Hunter's face and accusing his beanhead wife of sending the text, which resulted in Nash losing his temper and taking a cheap shot to close the segment. Backstage, Triple H scolded Nash for attacking Punk, and with a heavy heart asked him to leave the arena. But about 10 minutes later, a panicked John Laurinaitis came rushing through the hallway, informing Hunter that Nash had been in a serious car accident. Concerned for his friend's well-being, Triple H immediately left for the hospital. So why was Nash pulled from the match? It wasn't actually because of an injury or anything like that. He failed his physical because he was taking blood thinners as preventative medicine due to a history of heart disease in his family. The September 5th, 2011 episode of Raw saw another hostile exchange between Nash and Punk, with Punk stating that he expected Nash to interfere in the match at Night of Champions, and joking that he couldn't even legally drive the last time Kevin Nash was relevant in the wrestling business. Nash responded that every time he came to the ring, he left Punk laid out on his back, which was pretty much true. Triple H interrupted, revealing that newly found security footage from his office the night of SummerSlam had been unearthed.
Not the main security, some stuff they kind of forgot about.
And revealed that it was none other than Kevin Nash himself who had sent the text message using Hunter's phone. Nash cut a short promo admitting to the lie, but claiming that he had attacked Punk in order to make the WWE cool again, which was sort of a strange motivation considering Punk's pipe bomb promo had earned the company the most mainstream attention it had received in years.
Last week, John Cena lost his title to his arch enemy, a guy named CM Punk.
The conversation got heated and ended with Hunter assaulting Nash before publicly firing him. Later in the night, after Punk defeated R-Truth in the main event, Triple H came down to the ring, telling Punk that he was taking their match at Night of Champions, which would now be a no DQ match, personal, and agreeing to put his job as COO on the line at Punk's suggestion. This stipulation came as a surprise, as Triple H had been in power less than a month, which wasn't really enough time to establish himself as an authority figure and give the threat of him losing his position any meaning. Additionally, the last pay-per-view had carried a similar stipulation. The Cena would be fired should he lose his match against against Punk, which the WWE didn't follow through with. The go-home Raw on September 12th opened with another long exchange between Triple H and CM Punk, in which Punk accused Hunter and Vince McMahon of holding him back due to their bodybuilder fetish/fantasy about what a main event caliber superstar looks like. Triple H dismissed this allegation, mentioning guys like Shawn Michaels and Mick Foley who'd been main event level stars despite lacking a bodybuilder's physique. He accused Punk of making excuses for his own failures. But on his podcast, longtime commentator Jim Ross revealed that there was some truth to Punk's accusation that he was held back for not having the right body, and that backstage, Hunter was not a fan of Punk's look, remarking at one point that he had a fantasy and was too soft to be a WWE champion. As the conversation became more confrontational, Punk claimed that he was no longer speaking as CM Punk to Triple H. He was speaking as Phil Brooks to Paul Levesque, but his mic was continuously cut before he could finish his thought, which Triple H claimed to know nothing about. Frustrated at being censored, Punk attacked Hunter with a mic and left the ring. The match at Night of Champions opened with Punk jumping Hunter before the bell, and the two brawled on the outside, with Hunter sending Punk into the barricade and over the announcer's table. After both teased their finishers, they squared up in the ring, where the brawl resumed. Into the corner, and Punk missed a high knee, falling to the outside, where Hunter attacked his leg with the ring post, but Punk fought back, throwing Hunter into the barricade, then connecting with the knee. Triple H recovered and the match spilled into the crowd, with Hunter beating Punk up and down the aisles before Punk took back control using a garbage can and a guardrail. But his knees slowed him down, then threw Punk shoulder first into the steel chair in the corner. Triple H resumed working the knee with the ring post and the steel chair, but was sent straight into the steel steps following a failed figure 4 attempt on the outside. Barely able to stand, both men stumbled to the ring, where The Miz and R-Truth, who had been working at Angle where they claimed that there was a conspiracy to keep them out of the main event scene, Triple H recovered, cleaning house together rather than enter the ring. Frustrated, Triple H climbed towards the edge of the ring to see what was going on, allowing Punk to wake up and surprise him with a go to sleep. As both men struggled to their feet, Kevin Nash entered through the crowd, attacking Punk and Triple H before The match at Night of Champions received a mixed reception, with Wrestling Observer newsletter fans voting it a month later anyway. That doesn't appear to be the case. WWE main event match, at this point, had nothing but 3 screwjob wins over John Cena to hang his hat on. In a later interview, Triple H acknowledged that this storyline didn't work, but claimed that the decisions made along the way were Vince McMahon's, and that they were made with good intentions. Among the internet wrestling community, and even his own employees, Vince McMahon has a bit of a Willy Wonka reputation. He could wake up tomorrow and decide that WrestleMania should take place underwater, or all the wrestlers need to start smoking, and no one would even bat an eye. There's even a phrase, why would the WWE take their only wrestler to get over in years and beat him into the ground? Following Night of Champions against The Miz and R-Truth. Finally, at Survivor Series, Punk defeated Del Rio to win back the WWE Championship. He never got a rematch with Triple H, and never had a match with Kevin Nash at all. Nash returned in December and was defeated by Triple H instead. On the bright side, Punk's title run was, but during that time frame, he main evented only 5 of the 14 pay-per-views, with the WWE Championship taking the backseat to Matt Bid Show and John Cena vs. John Laurinaitis. Punk dropped the title to The Rock at Royal Rumble 2013 and went on to lose to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 29. He was defeated by Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam that year, but came out ahead in a feud with Ryback, and even managed to defeat all 3 members of the Shield in a handicap match at TLC 2013. Following the 2014 Royal Rumble, CM Punk walked out on the company due to concerns about his health and numerous other grievances. Aside from a short, unsuccessful run as a UFC fighter, Punk has spent the last few years semi-retired, working on non-wrestling related projects here and there. His current relationship with the WWE makes any sort of return in the near future seem unlikely, but both sides claim to never say never, so we'll just have to wait and see. As for now, as far as the WWE is concerned, Punk's name lives on only as a chant of protest.